It's a brand new day. Welcome to Monday on the AM show. We love you and we're always glad that you make the time to join us right here on the AM show. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. I do this together with Bernice, Abu-Baidoo, Lansah. From us to you, welcome aboard. Now, to kickstart matters, we'll bring you the news shortly, and right after that, we get into the news review with Sulemana Brahima. He's Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. He'll be joining us for the news review. But then we get into our big stories. And coming up this morning, Ghana is expected to get a staff-level agreement with the IMF on the 13th of December, 2022. Now, this morning, we're asking, what will this mean for Ghana? And what next after Ghana clinches that deal with the IMF, hopefully tomorrow, in terms of a staff-level agreement? Again, we'll be talking about the Bank of Ghana, which has rolled out new 1 Ghana cedi coins with enhanced features. And this has been made known to the Ghanaian community. Now, what's the rationale? And could there have been an appropriate time for this? Is the timing ill-timed, so to speak? Our guests this morning, Seth Tekpe, former Minister for Finance and Economic Planning. We also have Richmond Etuahene, a banking consultant. Both of them will join us for that conversation. But we also know 16 people were declared wanted by the police following violence at the NDC's National Youth and Women's Congress organized over the weekend. 3 persons were injured and there was destruction of property recorded during the Congress. Now, after all of this, having heard from Alex Segbefia, who was at the helm of affairs, what's next for the NDC and upcoming National Congress that we are going to be holding? We'll be getting into those matters. But it's a Monday again. We'll be serving you another dose of a drive safe so that all of us can stay safe, stay alive. But as always, we'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the discussions we're going to be having? Share them with us with the hashtag AM show via social media, via the stream as the show goes along. And when we activate the phone lines, be one of those to call and share your thoughts, because this show is all about you. Thank you for staying with us. Up next, the news. Welcome on the news belt, and in our first story, 2 suspected armed robbers have been shot dead by the police, while a police officer also sustained gunshot-related injuries in a gun battle between the suspected robbers and the anti-robbery squad of the Ghana Police Service at Gomwa, Bujumbura. The robbers, who were on 2 motorbikes, were said to have opened fire on the police, which resulted in the gun battle. Now, 2 out of the 4 suspected robbers are currently on the run. Richard Kwetunako, my colleague, has been following the incident and came through with this report.
The shooting incident happened at Gomwa Budumburam Lorry Station in the Gomwa East District of the Central Region. Police sources say the suspected robbers first opened fire on the police officers, which resulted in the gun battle. The suspected robbers are said to have links with the robbers that shot a foreigner at Caprice and took her money away last week. The police officers gunned down 2 of them and managed to seize the motorbikes they used in the operation. 2 of them unfortunately escaped, but the police say they are on a hunt for them. An eyewitness spoke to JoyNews. We suspect they may have gone to rob somewhere and they wanted to pass with their booty. All we saw was that the robbers had started opening fire on the police. When they opened fire on the police, a bullet hit a police officer. It was then that the police also opened fire on them. 2 of them died. We thank the police for rising up to the occasion. We want the police to arrest the 2 that are currently on the run, so we could have our peace in this camp. Meanwhile, some of the residents at Gomwa Budumburam have commended the Ghana Police Service for the hard work in dealing with situations of that nature.
Biton ye nimbe bi omo fi ina omo ba haya tensi omo abechi omo wa ba sanka saade we no anka kane no omo si labere camp edi bone na omo bo labere camp no stress omo njai na ebi na anro bi o ya tensi omo abeku omo labere camp ya no ba sanka ya ne omo anti a ye na ye ho akyere ye nti ere mo ati police for no omo yes adwuma no nyame mo omo adwuma nya kese.
The body of the deceased have been sent to the morgue while the injured police officer is receiving attention at the hospital. Reporting for Joy News, Richard Kwejenyako, Abu-Baidoo.
Now, President Akakpo says the time has come for more selfless approaches on various discussions around Ghana's economy and other sectors of national development. Speaking at the 60th anniversary celebration of the National Festival of Arts and Culture in Cape Coast, the president called for the end to extreme partnerships in the handling of partisanships, in the handling of matters of development of the country. There's more in this report.
According to the president, extreme partisanship in our national discourse has been a watershed moment in the country's quest for development. He wants a more patriotic and a selfless approach in tackling issues in the country.
Our country today needs patriotic citizens more than ever. The time has come for more selfless approaches to the discussions around our economy and other sectors of development. The time has come for us also to eschew extreme political partisanship and look into attaining the collective success of the ordinary Ghanaian. We must portray how patriotic we are by upholding the nation's constitution, respecting our country's symbols, traditions and heritage, acknowledging the sentiments of fellow countrymen and women, and contributing constructively to the growth and well-being of the nation.
The executive director of the National Commission of Arts and Culture, Janet Enanyami, said the festival is to revive and rekindle the patriotism in Ghanaians and allow the people of Ghana to appreciate and live harmoniously with each other, fostering oneness, which will help prevent strikes and other actions happening in the country.
We are recognizing and identifying ourselves with others, and that makes us as one people. That binds us together as a people. So what we are saying is that we are celebrating this culture to revive the patriotism in us, to rekindle it in us, to let us appreciate each other, let us live in harmony with each other, to make us one people.
Central Regional Minister Justina Marigold-Hassan in her address indicated that the festival offers an opportunity to honor ancestors and past heroes, as well as remind Ghanaians of their rich cultural heritage.
I believe the interaction among us will be a positive and fulfilling one. It should also provide a platform for us to learn about other parts of our country, as well as also open the regions to us. These are the building blocks for our unity as a people and a common destiny. This, I believe, will be the surest way of giving meaning to the commitment to unity in our diversity.
A chief representing the Upper East community in the Central Region, Alhaji, also acknowledged that patriotism can only be achieved if Ghanaians visited their heritage. He added that the Ghanaian culture is a complete way of life and will bring peace, unity, and patriotism when it is followed.
So this day is very important as traditional rulers and all Ghanaians. And that make us Ghanaians. You cannot survive in this global world without identity. People are struggling for identity. What is our identity? Our identity is that we are Ghanaians, we are Africans. So for us, we want to protect our culture, we want to project our culture, we want to showcase our culture, the beauty of it.
The festival, which commences in 2023, will begin from the district level through to the regional and the national levels. Reporting for Joy News, Richard Kwejenyako, Cape Coast.
Let's talk Christmas now, and you would have to brace yourselves to pay more for chicken this festive season because the Ghana Poultry Farmers Association is estimating an upward adjustment in the price of your favorite protein source. Chicken, initially selling at 55 Ghana cedis 2 weeks ago, now sells at 70 Ghana cedis on the market. However, this current price is expected to inch up even further before Christmas. President of the Ghana Poultry Farmers Association, Vincent Opongo-Usueje, attributes the increasing cost to the expensive poultry feed and pharmaceuticals. There is more in this report.
Chicken is enjoyed in most Ghanaian homes as a protein accompaniment to their favorite local meals, including fufu and rice and other continental dishes. It is the cheaper protein alternative to other meat sources. But the live chicken, eaten largely on festive occasions like Christmas, will see a marginal increase at most vending points.
As for Christmas, you have to give Ghanaians the fresh and healthy chicken.
Vincent Opongo-Usueje is president of the Ghana Poultry Farmers Association.
The brown one, the layer, as of now, we've priced it at 70 cedis per bed, the brown one. The white one, I mean the broiler, in fact, it will depend on the weight. That's why we cannot give any price for it.
With only a few days until the Christmas holidays, prices of both the broiler and layer breed have already increased on the market. Abna Boachewa sells poultry at the Ija market.
First near the G60, they say almost at they say 70 cedis. White one, no, almost when the first near the G65, they say 100 cedis.
Prices of poultry have seen nearly a 100% increment during the same period last year.
Last year, by this time, not that 35. And then I'm saying, okay, by this time, they're not call 40. The Christmas, I mean, they're 40. After Christmas, no, and I call 45. Till this year, they're cost too much.
The exorbitant cost of feed and medicines for the upkeep of the animal are attributable to the ballooning price of chicken.
If you look at the cost of production, I mean a ton per feed, which was 1,500 Ghana cedis per ton, is now 6,700 Ghana cedis. The percentage is too huge, and this is affecting the poultry industry.
For vendors here, the imminent price increment would mean a bad market for the season.
They say no near bar because of say 50 and go 55 preko, I go 60 70 preko peno. Well, our background now when you're ready, sir. To buy us in a make up samba. After Christmas and a day, and a back off from Kran. Because one to me, I could go back best 75 metako back and some not to talk no.
Regardless of the economic turbulence facing the country, are you willing to enjoy your scrumptious and succulent chicken this festive season? From here at Ija for JoyNews, my name is Emmanuel Bright-Kweku.
Now, over the weekend, the Ghanaian by-card comedy show at the National Theatre by Obi Amponsa was quite a thriller, delivering lots of laughter. Now, popular comedian Obi Amponsa provided humor lovers a reason to keep watch for his future content when he held his debut comedy show, Voices in My Head, in 2019. This time, by including international comedy star Trevor Gumbi, he expanded the boundaries of humor in Ghana. There is more in this report by Jacqueline Yeboah.
The doctor by day, comedian by night impressed his audience with rib-cracking content that elicited profound applause from the patrons over the weekend at the National Theatre. Previous shows by the comedian have seen shine amidst adversity. He believes this year's event is better, and the comedy space in Ghana is gradually seeing growth.
It's been great, man. It's a lot of experiences, man. I enjoyed my time on stage. I enjoyed last year as well, man. It's been good. It's been the same hard work they started before. It's the acknowledgement that has changed now. Like, people are enjoying us more.
The support?
Yes, the support is there. Corporate are feeling us, so it's all good, man. It's all good. Shows how much we've grown in the industry, and we are grateful to our pioneers who started this whole thing, us to also be beneficiaries of it.
International comedian Trevor Gumbi, who was the guest act for the Ghanaian by Card show, thrilled the audience with an exhilarating performance. He expressed his heartfelt appreciation to Ghanaians and hinted at future collaborations that will bring him back to the country.
I love Ghana, man. I wish I had more time, though, you know, because there's so much to see. But the people are wonderful. The audience was so amazing, so understanding of a crazy guy from South Africa. But I'm definitely coming through. If you guys invite me, I'd love to come through.
Fans who thronged the National Theatre too had their expectations met and hope to be part of next year's edition.
I was laughing throughout, so yeah, I think it was. I'm going to tell everybody to come because it was hilarious.
Links Entertainment, Sensation, Kwame Eugene and other popular comedians like Lexi, the comic, Ojo, Papayao and many more graced the event. Jacqueline Yeboah's report for JoyNews.
And on that comedic note, we end the news. But up next, the news review. Do stay with us. Well, thank you for staying with us on the news review. Let's get into the papers now as we interact with Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa, Sulemana Brahima. Mr. Brahima, if you can hear me, a very good morning to you. All right, we'll connect shortly with Mr. Brahima, but quite a lot to talk about. The NDC's Congress over the weekend for a youth organizer, national youth organizer, and a women's organizer. Gone well, but with lots of food for thought in terms of our politics, in terms of infighting, in terms of escalations, in terms of so many other matters that we ought to be looking at. We heard from Alex Sigbefia, who was at the helm of affairs organizing all of this, and he said that, look, to be honest, there are things that did not go right, and we can't pretend those don't exist like the MPP would, and that was what he said. But I found it a bit worrisome because if there are pockets of these in both parties, it's not about this person covering or that person not doing this or that. It's about whether, according to or across the tenor of our politics, we can work on these. It doesn't matter whether you are CPP, PNC, PPP, NDC, NPP. We don't want to see these scenes, and that's the bottom line. But let me start with some of the headlines while we await Sulemana Brahima to join the discussion. The Daily Graphic this morning says Dr. Dufour proposes rescue team to resolve economic challenges. That story is on page 16. I'll bring you some details of that. There's also aged to access NHIS without hindrance. And that story there as well on page 16. Pictured there, Dr. Bernard Okuboi, Chief Executive Officer of the NHIA. Then there's discussions on economy. Patriotism must reign supreme. President urges at NAFAC at 60. Then stop denigrating leaders. Professor Mensah Bonsu cautions citizens, and rice vegetable cultivation initiative launched. So where do we start? Let's start from the very start. Discussions on the economy. Patriotism must reign supreme. And now, President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo has called for more selfless, patriotic approaches to discussions around the economy and other areas of development. He said it was time to eschew extreme political partisanship in discussions around the economy and look to attaining the collective success and well-being of ordinary Ghanaians. The president said now more than ever, the country was in need of patriotic citizens who were ready to put the well-being of the country above selfish interest. He was speaking at the opening of the 60th anniversary celebrations of the National Festival of Arts and Culture, that is NAFAC in Cape Coast in the Central Region last Saturday. Also on the patriotic bit about citizens, remember, he told us to be citizens, not spectators. He said being patriotic required making sacrifices and placing the country's interest above parochial interests, stressing that, quote, to be patriotic requires special affection for one's own country, special concern for the well-being of the country, and willingness to sacrifice oneself to promote the country's good. And we'll have to explore that in the context of what the president has brought to bear. Let me take that other story on page 16 of the paper, and I'll just fuse those two stories together. So aged to access NHIS without hindrance. And the National Health Insurance Authority has revised its policies to enable Ghanaians 70 years and above to access health services on the National Health Insurance Scheme without hindrance. Although persons in that group are exempted, they still needed to register to sign on to the scheme, subscribe to the service, hold a valid NHIS card, and also wait for a 30-day maturity period after subscription before accessing the service. Now, the new regime has, however, waived all those hindrances, and instead, the aged only have to show the national identification card, that is the Ghana card, which has been linked to the NHIS database to access care at any covered health facility. For me, a brilliant addition. And maybe to wrap before I bring in Suleiman Brahima, Dr. Dufour proposes rescue team to resolve economic challenges. And former Finance Minister Dr. Kwabena Dufour has proposed the establishment of a national economic rescue team to help find immediate and lasting solutions to the current economic challenges. He said the depth of the economic crisis and the ongoing attempt to restructure the domestic debt towards macroeconomic stability and recovery of the economy called for the establishment of an economic recovery team. Quoting him, he says, "This is so because it has been established that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created the problems. Hence, there is a need for the establishment of an economic national rescue team to resolve the present crisis." The former finance minister, who had a stint with the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., USA, as an economist in the African department, said the proposed rescue team, which should be national in character and non-political, should comprise experienced bankers, insurance executives, successful business people, university professors in the field of banking and business, and respectable statesmen with experience in governance. Suleiman Brahima, a very good morning to you. Welcome aboard.
Good morning, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Great. I hope your weekend went well and you're looking forward to a wonderful week.
Well, it's a tiring period of the year, but that's what it has to be.
Okay, so before we even get into these stories, we just put out a story about the prices of chicken and how chicken is skyrocketing in terms of, it just got me thinking because I prefer fish and fish tends to be more expensive than poultry products and meat. So if even chicken is skyrocketing, then I don't know, maybe we'll just settle for eggs at a point. I don't know what your take is. What is your preference?
Well, fish as well.
Fish, right.
Between chicken and meat, I will still go for chicken. So I cannot rule chicken out.
Okay, so 3 stories for your reflection. The president says we must be more patriotic. We must be citizens so that we can resolve the problems of the country. We must show that patriotic spirit, and that collective success will be ours as we seek the well-being of the ordinary Ghanaian. Then Dr. Dufour is proposing a rescue team to resolve economic challenges that is non-partisan, that cuts across the board to ensure that we have something sustainable. And then the aged are to access NHIS without hindrance. 70-year-olds, all you have to do and above, show your Ghana card. You don't need an NHIS card, and everything will be done for you. Quick reflections on these 3.
Well, let me start from what I think is very positive, which is the story in relation to services to the aged and the fact that you would have to show your Ghana card and access the health insurance scheme. I think that's a positive development, provided that it's not just a brilliant idea on paper, because we know that the health insurance scheme would also be going through some difficulties given the economic situation that we are in. But if measures have been put in place to ensure that the scheme still operates the way it should, and this is a new measure to support easy access for the aged, I think that's really a brilliant idea. And we need to commend it and we need to support it at all times. So that for me is very positive. Dr. Dufour's suggestion about the way to tackle the current economic crisis is not a bad idea. I think some of these things indeed require non-partisan, all-inclusive approaches towards dealing with national crisis such as the one that we are in. And so I think it's a great call. I remember during the NDC.
Well, we have a bit of an issue there. We'll try to get that connection restored to Suleimana Brahima. Suleimana, we can see you now. Please go ahead.
Yes, so I think it's been done before. There have been occasions where national stakeholder consultation meetings are organized to brainstorm and share ideas on how we deal with national issues. So I think it's not a bad idea. The question is whether those who have to listen to and make sure that this is done would do so. Now, the third part relates to the president calling for more patriotism, which I think is a good call. It's a step in the right direction. We need at all times to be patriotic towards our country, and especially in a crisis situation like this, we certainly have to be more committed, more loyal, and more patriotic to our country. But that must certainly start with leadership. And for me, if the president is talking about patriotism, I would want to see how patriotic he himself has been and is going to be. Because so far, I mean, it's difficult for me to point to specific acts that demonstrate rare sense of patriotism on the part of the president. I don't think that patriotic leaders would be, spending thousands of dollars flying luxurious presidential jets around the world when they have kids who are lying on their bellies to study, kids who are sitting under trees to study, pregnant women who have difficulties accessing, maternal health. I don't think that any patriotic leader looking at the crisis that we are in would say that allocations are being made to still continue with the construction of a national cathedral when people are suffering, when people really are struggling to have their daily bread because of the economic crisis that we are in. I don't think that is a sense of patriotism on the part of the president and on the part of the government. Again, any patriotic leader at this stage would take remedial measures to ensure that at least those who have benefited in government can be made to sit aside so that we can have a reduced size of government, as it's been done elsewhere. In Cote d'Ivoire, the president decided to cut the cabinet down because of the economic crisis, and their crisis is not even up as what we have. Yet the president is adamant and keeping that huge size of government with huge burden on the country. And these are people who are endowed, who can survive even without these largesse of government. And still, what do we see? The Ghanaian people are saying, look, even if Oforiatta is the most competent, in order to build confidence in the system, please let him go. His own MPs have spoken. The Ghanaian people have spoken. Every day you see Ken must go. The president is adamant. What is the sense of patriotism in that? So we want to see that sense of patriotism being exhibited by the president himself, as we call on others to also do the same. And when the president does it, leadership by example, I'm sure that it will be easy for all of us to campaign for others to do even more than expected of them. But at this stage, I think that the president himself needs to show us his sense of patriotism, even though all others need to do the same.
Right. And so it all starts with the president, the head of our national household, if you like. Let's take a quick look at this story very quickly, and we'll move on from there. Stop denigrating leaders, Professor Menso Bunsu cautions citizens. Now, a justice of the Supreme Court, Professor Henrietta Mensah Bunsu, has urged citizens to refrain from utterances and acts that tend to denigrate leaders in the country. She said such actions had the tendency of causing disaffection among the people, which could lead to instability in the country. Quote, maintaining our peace and working through our problems within a peaceful country is what holds a good future for all of us, particularly those of us with our best years already behind us, she said. Now, she said in her experience as the UN Secretary General's Deputy Special Representative for Rule of Law in the UN mission in Liberia, she had learned that surviving a war was sometimes as difficult as surviving peace. Speaking at the launch of her book, Joy, a biography of Henrietta Mensah Bonsu in Accra. She also entreated political leaders to keep an eye on the social temperature of polity and maintain social cohesion to keep citizens at peace. It's a fantastic book. I have a copy, and I proffer it to you if you don't have a copy, and to everyone else listening to us. And Joy is indeed one of her names. But quick reflections on what she says. Stop denigrating leaders. Some would also tell you that, look, sometimes the leaders ought to be whipped in line. Where do we draw the line, Suleimana?
Well, again, I think it's a welcome call. We were all brought up to be respectful towards leaders or the elderly. And so if we are seeing that go down and down, we need to make the call that it's important for people to refrain from acts that denigrate our leaders. But at the same time, I think it's important that we make the point that leaders must also act in ways that deserve the kind of respect that they need to be accorded. And leaders in this way, I'm talking about not only leaders, but also religious leaders, our chieftaincy or our chiefs, because increasingly some of these people are acting in ways that you really wonder what they want and what is actually influencing them to act and to speak the way they do. And without mentioning names, we've heard some big chiefs talk in ways that you are tempted to respond, even though we know that, look, when chiefs speak, you are not supposed to perhaps retort. But if chiefs now begin to speak like ordinary party members and party propagandists and all of that, then increasingly they are putting themselves up for actions that would eventually denigrate them. If political leaders who are supposed to be leading the people are abusing the resources of the state, are stealing from the people, and then you expect that the people should keep quiet because speaking up would mean that you denigrate them, I'm afraid that cannot happen. If the president of the republic has to act in ways that would protect the public purse, that would ensure integrity, credibility, and all that happens, and that is not being done, and you expect that the people should be quiet because speaking up would mean denigrating the president, I'm afraid that is not how to build a nation. As the president said, we need to be citizens and not spectators. And being citizens in this regard would mean that speaking up our minds and speaking truth to power. And we should never construe or misconstrue the act of speaking truth to power to be an act of denigrating authority or leadership. Nations are built when people speak up and speak truth to power. I don't think that nations are built when citizens become timid in the name of revering their leadership or not denigrating leaders. So it's a welcome call, but the leaders must also act in ways that would ensure that we give them the respect that we have to give them.
All right, let's quickly get into Republic Press. We have a stack of papers, Suleimana, so maybe we'll go straight to the point on some of the next headlines and stories we're going to look at. Failure to build National Cathedral will be a disgrace to Ghana, Akufo-Addo. That is the Ochehene saying so. I'll leave you to reflect on that. I'll not share my own thoughts. There's also Pentecost Church to regulate sexual activity of members. That story is on page 7 of the paper. Biden to host Akufo-Addo and others at US-Africa Summit. Dead goat haunts Mahama as he vents frustrations. And so many interesting stories here. You know what? So let me just take them one by one. I'll take the first 3, you react, and then I'll do another 2. Now, former President Mahama has, for the first time in many years, clarified why he stated that he developed a dead goat syndrome. According to him, he relied on the said idiomatic expression to point out the frustration associated with the deregulation of petroleum prices. This, he stated, was because he knew that if the fuel prices went up, the leadership of the Trades Union Congress and other unions would not leave him in peace. Mr. Mahama said he could not bear the mass labor unrest that was prevalent at the time. And so that's the first story. The other one I will look at, and you can react to the one about the National Cathedral. I'll not read the details of that. I'm sure we know already. But the Church of Pentecost of Ghana has taken bold steps to check the sexual life of members. A new code of conduct launched by the church explicitly states that any member of the Pentecost Church caught engaging in premarital and extramarital affairs should go on suspension or have his or her membership withdrawn. Now, the Pentecost Church's position is that the church is not a mere social institution, but a holy family of saints being trained and equipped until we all attain the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. A section of the rule of conduct explained that, quote, marital fidelity and chastity before and during marriage are the hallmarks of a true Christian. And let me just add this final bit for now. Or better still, react to the three. Mahama on Dead Goat and why he said it, the Pentecost Church, and the Ochehene on the National Cathedral. Let's do those for now before I bring in the political story.
Well, in Pentecost Church, I have dozens and dozens of friends who are members of the Pentecost Church. It's great to hear this, and I wish them well. That's all that I can say. I wish them well. On President Mahama, of course, that became a very topical issue when he said he had become dead goat at that time. Well, I mean, upon reflections, if he says, well, I was just frustrated, what can we say? I mean, he spoke out of frustration. I don't know why he's even going back to it at this time. Now, on the Ochehene statement on the National Cathedral, I think that, well, this time around he's been mild, and we are grateful to him that this time around he didn't condemn those of us who are at least opposed to the construction in this critical time of economic crisis as being
which is
people from the villages. I think this time around he's quite charitable, and we are grateful for his continuous words of wisdom on national affairs. We are grateful to him, and that's all that I can say. People have listened to him, and I believe he can continue. He can continue on this path. On his views on...
Do I sense sarcasm when you say he can continue on this path? I mean, I just get a hint, a tinge of sarcasm. Is it just me, or am I being misled?
Oh, well, like I said, if the chief will refer to those who criticize the leadership style and other actions of the president as being either witches or persons from villages, and this time round, he's only talking about how embarrassing it will be to Ghana and to the president if the National Cathedral was not constructed. I don't know what to say, because I believe that he witnesses the kind of suffering that people are going through. I believe that he witnesses the fact that there are Ghanaian children who don't have the basic things, to study in schools, and his preference is how not to embarrass the president, rather than how to ensure that the lives of people, of the ordinary people, are catered for. I leave that to him. I would have wished that the Ochehene would have been talking about how President Akufo-Addo, after leaving office, would be remembered forever as a leader who came and did a lot for this country, and not a leader who came and was trying to build a national cathedral at a time when the country was struggling. Not a leader who came and was flying luxurious jets around the world when the country's economy was in crisis. Well, but if that is what the Ochehene wants us to remember President Akufo-Addo for, yeah, so be it. We would remember him when he leaves.
All right. Let's get into those two other stories. In fact, four, because I'll add two very interesting international stories very briefly. But on page 3, Kwabena Ejapong drops bombshell, and a one-time general secretary of the New Patriotic Party, Kwabena Ejapong, has asked Ghanaians to brace up for tougher times amid economic hardship. He reiterated that Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta should have resigned since Ghana opted to look for international aid at the IMF. In a discussion with my own senior man and good friend, Kweku Sentim Misa, Mr. Ejapong restated his views that Ken Ofori-Atta's dogged anti-IMF stance was the reason he needed to leave his post as finance minister after the government opted for an IMF bailout program. Now, in terms of the NDC's Congress over the weekend, amid scattered violence and allegations of vote buying, the National Democratic Congress went to the polls Saturday to elect some of its national officers at Cape Coast in the Central Region. The elections were to choose its national youth and women executives was nearly marred by pockets of violence, as at least 6 people were reportedly injured, thereby leading to the suspension of the electoral process for hours. In the vote to lead the youth wing of the party, both leading candidates, George Opariado and Bronya Jemfi, ran tough campaigns, yet appeared to have left many delegates uninspired and undecided, hence the need for some last-minute political intrigue to make the needed difference. You saw the scenes, I am sure. Some people purported to have been shot, and lots of people, about 16, arrested on the back of the incidents there. Now, before you get into those two, I also want you to consider, I followed this yesterday on the international news. Base editing, revolutionary therapy clears girls' incurable cancer. And apparently there is some treatment for leukemia that has been found. So blood is altered in a way, I think the DNA, so that the blood that is fed into someone who has leukemia can then eventually attack the cancerous cells. You know, leukemia is cancer of the blood. And then it has worked for this young girl who is the first person to have benefited from this experimental, this experiment, so to speak. She is called Alisa, and she is 13. And finally, Nobel Peace Prize. Russian laureate told to turn down award, but they didn't listen to the Russian authorities. Quick reflections, the politics, and then these two international stories.
Well, the medical revolution is great news. It takes some time. Sometimes when you hear about this, you say, oh, okay, from next year, fortunately, those who have troubles would begin to have some remedial treatment. But some of these things, sometimes it takes decades to become something that can be used, in a wider way. So it's good news, and I believe that the researchers would continue to work at it. The NDC Youth and Women's Wings Congress in Cape Coast, I think that the violence was really needless and condemnable. I don't know why an internal party affair should, have those kinds of, violent scenes. So it's really condemnable, and the leadership of the party should have to take steps to ensure that these things would not happen or repeat itself at the National Congress to elect the chairman, secretary, and the other positions. Well, the results, I have followed it. It appears that things don't look good for those who are seeking to challenge the incumbents, because even though it was very, very competitive, if you look at the National Youth Organizer race, it was very competitive, same as the Women's Organizer position. Very, very competitive, very tight if you look at the results, and yet the incumbents managed to win. Looking at that, if it is anything to go by, I would say, well, things may not be looking good for people like Asiedu Nketia. Of course, the general secretary position is open because you don't have an incumbent competing. So one can only wish them well. The final part is Kwabena Japan. I watched that interview with KSM, and I think that over time it's emerging that Kwabena Japan really speaks his mind. Yes, he's a member of the NPP.
Especially as someone who is trying to become the flag bearer of the party.
Yeah, exactly. I think that not just this interview. For some time now, he's really been speaking his mind, and he's establishing some mark of credibility for himself. Even though I would say that looking at the competition, he is a low-profile candidate in terms of his chances. But he doesn't have to win to establish his track record. I think sometimes it is important for you to make your principles known, so that even if you don't end up being a leader, people will know who you are, rather than trying to say things that you know very well that don't align with your internal principles. And so I really salute him for speaking up his mind. And from the way things are going within this government, I think that any credible leader of the party who would want to run a very competitive elections in the 2024 race must be someone who is prepared to distinguish himself or to really set himself apart from the mess that the Akufo-Addo regime is creating. I don't think that anyone can run on the record of the Akufo-Addo regime to successfully compete for the 2024 race. And that is why I'm quite sad for people like Dr. Bawumia, who stands tall in terms of the race.
Right.
And it's going to be a challenge what record he's going to run on. And even Alan, if he happens to win, it's going to be the same problem.
All right, let's get through these stories. Ghanaian Times, the only new one that I see there, 2023 budget, Parliament races against time to approve budget as minority threatens to reject some tax handles and allocations. Then there is the Daily Guide, which also reflects stories we've seen already, but Alan storms NPP headquarters, promises to fund albums. So I would like you to focus on the Ghanaian Times bit about racing to approve the budget. Then there is Lands Minister declares Accra Zoo safe. That's in the Ghanaian Publisher. You recall that situation a few months ago when someone actually lost his life under bizarre circumstances. Then the Chronicle, who born dog? Accra commando slapped in traffic by 61-year-old pensioner. Has to do with a story where an Accra Circuit Court presided over by Samuel Bright Aqua has advised that the security detail of the Greater Accra Minister Henry Quartey should be changed following an alleged assault on him by his family head. According to him, if somebody could slap a whole regional minister, then his security detail should be changed. He made the suggestion on Thursday, November 8, 2022, when one Ni Odoi Kwao II, alias Robert Kumsin, 61, and a retired computer programmer who is said to be the head of the regional minister's family, was brought before him for allegedly slapping Mr. Henry Quartey in traffic and threatening to kill him. Quick reflections.
Well, that's a very complex story. At one point, you see family issues. At another point, it's security issues. Another point is protocol issues. But of course, ultimately, it's a question of rule of law. If the family head did the wrong thing, whether he slapped the regional minister or he slapped the cleaner on the street, that's unlawful, and the law must deal with him. In terms of whether or not the regional minister's security should be changed, for me, it comes down to the circumstances surrounding the incident, and perhaps the minister's protocol perhaps understand the security issues better than maybe a judge would. And so, well, I can only leave that to the security, detail of the minister to determine that.
Let me just pick your thoughts on this before we go in some 30 seconds. You may have heard the American ambassador speaking about rights and all of that. So she says on the anti-gay bill, as we call it in summary, Ghanaian MPs must respect people's rights. That's according to the American ambassador. She also says, we want your gay children to be safe. That's according to the American ambassador, rebuffing claims of promoting LGBTQ in Ghana. And we know what that comes along with. But then we have Sam George, who is one of the key proponents of that bill, saying if the United States allows polygamy, then they can talk about LGBTQ plus rights in Ghana. Quick take on that.
Well, I think matters of human rights are always important matters and shouldn't be based on emotions. I think we need to look at matters of rights from whatever we have assented to or agreed to at the international platforms. We cannot accept certain principles at the international platforms or international mechanisms and say we would do something that tends to the contrary back at home. Of course, there's always the contestation between the international universalism and national peculiarities when it comes to matters of human rights.
Right.
And I think it's important that as a country, we reflect quite deeply on this whole piece of legislation that we are trying to introduce, so that at the end of the day, we wouldn't have a law that is so widespread and may undermine the rights of certain individuals. But talking about that, Ben, you know, over the weekend was the International Human Rights Day, and I believe this is emerging from that. But together with the United Nations in Ghana, the EU delegation in Ghana, and in partnership with the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice, tomorrow we have a major forum. And I'm happy to say that the forum will be covered live on Joy FM. And this will be at the British Council Hall. So perhaps we can have an extension of this conversation at this forum.
Right.
Have the Justice Minister and Attorney General speaking, the UN Resident Coordinator speaking, the EU Ambassador speaking, and it will be chaired by the Commissioner for Straj, and then we would have the NCCE also speaking. So those who can make it are welcome, and those who can't are welcome to listen to it on Joy FM. It will be from 9 to midday.
All right. Suleimana, thanks so much for always doing us the honors. Thanks for joining us this morning, and we wish you the best with that endeavor and in the rest of the week. Suleimana Brahima is the Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. He just joined us for that conversation. But I'm sure you're thinking about Qatar 2022. Mouth-watering lineups coming our way tomorrow. And you would want to know all about the excitement. Just stay with us. Sports is up next. We'll bring you all the scoop.
Good morning and welcome to the sports segment on the AM show. My name is Abigail Sanoso. So this morning we're beginning from home where the Black Galaxies are preparing towards the CHAN tournament, which is slated for January 2023 in Algeria. In light of this, the Black Galaxies held Accra Heart of Oak and beat them 2-1 in a friendly encounter at the Ghana Soccer Center of Excellence in Papram. Joy Sports' Haruna Mubarak has filed this report.
CHAN is fast approaching. With about 4 weeks to the start of the competition, Coach Anna Walker and his Black Galaxies team know they must prepare adequately to face Africa's best home-based players. That called for a test against Hearts of Oak, which proved to be quite a good one. The Phobians began the game on a blistering note and took the lead in the 36th minute after Amankwa Befi tagged the ball home following a cross from Salifu Ibrahim. The Galaxies returned to the second half strongly and staged a comeback thanks to goals from Brighter J and David Abagner's penalty.
Simple goal, nice.
Captain on the side, Gladson Awako, underscores the importance of the encounter.
It wasn't bad compared. Both teams played very well, and it was a very good test for both teams, especially us, because we have a competition ahead, and it was a very good game for us, very good exercise for us this afternoon. Though it's our first, should I say, competitive game for us, and it's not bad. So I know we still have time to get ourselves ready and all that.
The Black Galaxies are drawn in Group C of the CHAN, where they face defending champions Morocco, Sudan, and Madagascar. Coach Anna Walker hopes to further improve his side before the continental competition.
Ayers played very well, and they were physical, which I think I have to work on that, because the North Africans play physical football, and that is what I have seen this evening. So I need also to work on that. Besides, my scoring was also finding difficult in scoring, unlike when I get the Division 1 and Division 2s. I scored them 7-3-4. But this match I've seen that my goal scoring is difficult. We have to work on that also. And like I said, that's the more reason I called for this game, to see where the team falls short. And I have seen it.
It's been 4 friendlies for the Black Galaxies, and they've won all. According to the head coach, Anna Walker, they played very well. He wanted a tough opponent, and he had it in House of Folk today. And because of that, he has seen some loopholes in his team that he's going to rectify ahead of the tournament in Algeria. So we're hoping to see what will happen. We understand that they have a friendly on Thursday as well at Accra Sports Stadium, hoping that the team will rectify all their mistakes ahead of the tournament next month. Haruna Mubarak for JoyNews from Pram Pram.
Well, that'll be all for sports this morning. We are back at midday with more news.
Welcome back on the AM show, and right now we get into our big stories, starting with that account of 16 people who have been declared wanted by the police following violent clashes at the NDC's National Youth and Women's Congress over the weekend. 3 persons were injured, and there was destruction of property recorded during the Congress. Now we ask, what is next for the NDC and the upcoming National Congress? Well, we get into that conversation as it's we kickstart the big stories. Our guests will be joining us on that beat shortly as we have that discussion. But you must know by now about some of the violence that characterized what happened at the NDC's Congress, specifically for the National Youth Organizer position and the Women's Organizer positions. So shortly we'll have joining us for that conversation, Director Legal Affairs of the NDC, Abraham Amaliba. He joins us on phone. Mr. Amaliba, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Good morning to you and to your viewers as well.
Let me ask you, I listened to Alex Sigbefia, who managed all of this, and he had some hard words for the NDC, and he ended by saying, look, we are not like the MPP, and so we're going to take the blame for some of what transpired, and it's a shame, so to speak. But how different are you from the MPP, because you criticized them when there were some similar incidents in their Congress, and now you're showing the exact same signs, if not worse, with shootings and all of that. Let's start with your appreciation of what happened on Saturday, and then you can get into the comparison.
Well, on Saturday, the youth and the women's wing had the opportunity to elect their leaders. That took place, and we all know who are the victors and who are the vanquished. Largely, in my view, the delegates retained those who were already occupying those positions. Newcomers came in just to fill in positions that the incumbents did not contest. It's a clear indication of confidence in the current executive. And don't forget that the NDC has always said that they won the 2020 election, but just that with the machinations of the EC, they were declared the losers. Now, if you so claim, then why would you change your winning team? Why would you change those who gave you that victory that was stolen anyway? And so I think the delegates went into the conferences, both women and youth, with that mindset that, look, let's retain this, but they did a good work. And so That for me is what I would say for now. But with the violence, I must say that it's appalling.
Before you get into the violence, you just said something, so I just want to take you up on that. You're a lawyer. You just said that victory was stolen from the NDC in the past election and that these were the same leaders at the helm of affairs. But we all know about that court's resolution, the Supreme Court, on that matter, and many of your leaders have moved away from that. So to go back to victory was stolen from you and all of that, I mean, why would you want to do that?
Court cases don't take away your feelings. Feelings are innate. You know that. So I'm saying that the NDC, as a political party, it's a feeling. The court case don't rob away or don't take away your feelings, how you feel. So may we proceed now?
Okay, please go ahead then on the other point of the violence.
Yes. So the violence I indicated earlier that is appalling, it's unacceptable. The signs were there, and as Alexander indicated, myself and him serve on the Congress Planning Committee. So the signs were there, and we deployed a number of policemen thinking that will be able to deal with the matter. And so I think that much as the blame could be put on the doorsteps of the contestants whose, particularly this is about the youth wing, that is where the problem emanated from, the Bronya Jemfi and Pablo. And much as the blame can be put before them, I also think that we need to be questioning the security agencies. Because I think we deployed more than 100 security personnel, 80 from the police service, I think, or 50. When you add all, we will be going to 100 and something, because we also had a party security man also assisting the police. So how come? We need to ask those questions as well. But I think that it doesn't portend well for us. But this is also a dress rehearsal for our Congress proper on Saturday. The lessons learned here will be used to deal with emerging issues at the Congress. And I think that the Congress will be much more peaceful than what we saw.
Right. So I was going to get there, that what would be the lessons then that you would learn and apply to prevent similar incidents in the bigger Congress, the National Congress. But an interesting take you have when you say that some 80 police officers or security personnel were on hand, close to about 100, and so you would lay the blame on them. But how much blame would you apportion to your own members, the delegates?
No.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'll give you the opportunity to answer. Your own delegates and maybe even those who stood for these elections. How much blame do you take as a party?
Indeed, I indicated that much of the blame can be laid at the doorsteps of the two contestants whose supporters caused those confusion. I only questioned. I said, we anticipated this, and we put together a security team that we thought was up to the task, and that's why I gave you the numbers, that clearly 100 security personnel should have been able to deal with the matter. So we need to ask questions. So as for the security agents, I don't blame them. I only say, let's ask questions. But I indicated that, look, the blame must be put at the doorsteps of the contestants. They are the people who support us, engage in that. We didn't have that with the women's wing. It is a youth. And I single out, I mentioned Pablo, I don't shy away, and then I mentioned Bronya Jemfi. They should be responding to these things, because their conduct, their supporters, the conduct of their supporters has brought some shame to the party.
Right. I have two questions related to the gun violence that we saw. And it's particularly important to me because we're talking about gunshots at your intra-party level. And I want to cast my mind back to 2020 when the election was held and 8 people lost their lives. And all that we've said about that, it is a great worry for me and people, we've spoken to in recent times on the back of what happened. So tell me, how exactly did that happen? What was the protocol, basically, for people coming to the grounds with arms and all of that? What is going to change in that regard?
And that is where I tend to question the security agency. I thought that in such a situation where you have massive crowds, the security agency will engage in searches, before people are allowed into the venue. How did we get that wrong with 80 up to 100 security agencies? Were they thoroughly searched? Were people thoroughly searched? How come that was able to pass through, the gun was able to pass through? We having a planning committee meeting this today to review the activities that took place in Cape Coast. These questions will be asked. And we will need the coordinators in that Cape Coast conference to tell us how all this happened. So we'll have a review of the activities, and then we'll be able to appreciate why that happened. Was it because the numbers were not enough? Do we need more numbers? And if we needed more numbers, why didn't the security agencies indicate to us that we needed to have more numbers? But I think that gunshots on that day gave us a very bad name, I must say.
Right. But even as you say all of this, it was the intervention of the police that restored, some sanity. But let me find out from you. There are some 16 people who are, there's a manhunt for them now, as far as the police is concerned, for different things they may have done in that Congress. How do you react to that? Are you going to aid the police fish out these people?
I think if the identities of those persons are known, the party, I'm sure today, and as I indicated, today will issue a press release after our meeting. The party would assist in fishing those people out. We don't stand for violence. That violence was not sanctioned. And if it's not sanctioned, the party should be seen distancing itself. And distancing itself will also mean that assisting the police to fish out those persons. And I think that if the police provides us with names or identities of those persons, we should be able to as it were, fish them out.
So there's police-specific video footage of the event. Those 16 suspects have been identified as far as the police is concerned in terms of having participated in the violence. There's a bounty of 10,000 Ghana cedis on the heads of each one of them. So I'd like for you to reiterate. Is that to say that your party, hold on, your party is distancing itself from these people and you're going to collaborate with the police to fish them out?
So that makes it very easy. I would find out from Alex after this interview whether he has a footage. It will come to the planning committee meeting. We'll be able to identify them if we are, and then we'll give them out. I think the party is not going to shield, I must say. The party is not going to shield anybody for wrongdoing.
All right. Let me also find out. So does that mean that even without having further details, you are not going to be offering any legal representation to these 16 people? We don't know all the full facts or, the entire range of actions these people may have committed. Are you saying that you are totally distancing yourself from these members of your party? Legally speaking.
You are now bringing in my profession. And my profession, like the Hippocratic Oath, lawyers are also called to the bar. And if anybody needs a service of a lawyer, you are not to turn that person down. So the politics of it is different from the legal aspect. You don't marry the two. And so if anybody who is in conflict with the law needs representation, you don't say that nobody should represent that person. That will be going against the Constitution.
So let's just say that we could see some of these people with representation by some stalwarts, legal brains in the NDC, and that could happen, and there's no problem with that.
There's no problem with that because they are manifesting their legal profession, which the Constitution enjoins them to provide legal assistance. And that's why in my submission, I sought to draw in the Hippocratic Oath.
Right.
And so in that case, too, you cannot force a lawyer who is of an NDC persuasion who decides to provide those legal services.
But what does that do in terms of the optics of things? Because some people naturally would say that then this is the party fomenting violent activity. In one breath, you say, we don't like this, we're pushing them out, let the police do its job. And in another breath, you're saying, we're giving legal representation to them. I just want you to put that side by side with some of the things.
Okay,
Hold on. Some of what people said when Freddie Blai's firm, for example, had something to do with Aisha Huang, the Galamsey Queen. People said, they are legal counsel, they could do this. But others said, for the optics of fighting Galamsey, we shouldn't see you doing something like that. Is this not a similar situation?
It will be different if the legal directorate under my jurisdiction decide that lawyers should go and defend those who are in conflict with the law. It is different. Where individuals who are in conflict with the law decide to choose their lawyers, I think you should understand it. As a wing of the political party, which is the NDC legal team, we are not going to encourage lawyers to go defending people who have caused mayhem at our Congress. There isn't going to be a whip that lawyers go to the aid of these people. But as individuals who are in conflict with the law, if they choose to go for lawyers, and then those lawyers happen to be NDC lawyers, we cannot fault them for so doing.
I mean, that is very politically convenient, right? You will not come out and say that as a party, we are assigning people. But if we see them representing, we can only assume that they are doing so from their own personal standpoint as legal counsel. I mean, even if that happened, we wouldn't know, would we?
If that happens, you are capable of knowing because you are a reputable news portal, you are a reputable media house, you are capable of investigation. You've done that, and you expose it. So that would not happen.
Let's talk about the win of Pablo and Dr. Bissiu. And I'm talking about Abu-Baidoo and Dr. Hannah Bissiu. These are the same people who occupied those positions. And some have said those are the people who oversaw those areas, youth organization, women's issues in the party, and you lost the last general election. Your party has retained them. What does this mean going into election 2024?
And I earlier indicated the contrary to that statement, this statement you just made, the belief is that these people did well. When you take, for instance, the youth wing, Pablo, as leader of the youth wing of the party, did a lot. And for the first time, we won in the university. Indeed, we won in the University of Ghana. And that's why I've always told you that.
That is actually in Ayawaso West Wuogon, right?
Sure.
Right.
In the campuses, the NDC did extremely well in the 2020 election. Whom will you give that credit to? That should be Pablo. And so, in the belief of the party members, it is the view that they won the elections, but just that the machination of the EC stole the elections from them. And so the retention is a retention of what they feel took place in 2020. And that manifested in the outcome that we saw.
So just to wrap the conversation, my very final bit to you. You keep talking about winning the election, but yet being declared a loser. You just mentioned what some people in your party think about the machinations of the EC and a stolen election, so to speak. You are not on IPAC currently. I just want to find out, what is the NDC stance going to be moving forward? You're having all these national elections for your party. In the end, you want to assume the reins of power. What are you going to be doing? How are you going to collaborate further with the EC to ensure that some of these problems you faced in the past, you claim you faced, will not recur in 2024? That's my final bit to you.
It's all a fool doesn't learn from his past mistakes, or a fool doesn't learn from what has occurred in the past. And my father has told me that the thing that doesn't kill you gives experience. The thing that doesn't kill you makes you better. And so clearly, these are matters that the new executive, don't forget that on Saturday, there will be a new executive that will take over the reins of power. That new executive will then start organizing for the parliamentary elections and organizing for the presidential elections. The new executives will take on board the current happenings with IPAC. And at that level, the executives will take a decision on it.
Mr. Amaliba, we're grateful for your time with us this morning. Abraham Amaliba is a member of the legal team of the National Democratic Congress. We were just talking about some of the forgettable scenes that characterized the National Congress as far as the youth wing and the women's organization of the party are concerned on Saturday. We're taking a bit of a breather, and when we return, we'll be getting into other aspects of our conversation with a focus on the economy, dynamics from years ago, where we are currently, and what the way forward is, even as we anticipate that staff-level agreement between Ghana's government and the IMF. What can we expect? Stay for that. Welcome back on the AM show, and let me also usher in my colleague Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah, who joins me now in the studio. Good morning, somebody.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm okay. A bit of a flu trying to
I can imagine.
get me, but
you'll be fine.
It is what it is.
You'll be fine.
It's been a long year. It's been a stressful year.
Tea, or you prefer coffee?
I don't do coffee.
Okay.
I found out yesterday when I met some of our colleagues here that I'm not the only one, apparently. Some people take coffee and it has the reverse effect. I learned this from secondary school, so you can imagine how many years ago. Apparently, it's same with some other people, so I'm not alone.
Sorry. I'll get you some warm tea then.
We'll look at that. Maybe some lemon tea. I'm specific. You're looking lovely, by the way. Are these brooches, where do you get them from?
Kindly sponsored by one lady at our makeup department,
Wow.
Esther. Yeah, she gets them for me.
Lovely.
You very much.
Okay.
I like your pocket square thingy. This is not a square. What's it like? A pocket flower?
It's a pocket square. It's just intentionally spilling over, which is how I'm hoping that fortune, grace, goodness, mercy will spill over for me in 2023.
Amen. And for all our viewers as well, let me say thank you to you and welcome to the show. Ben, this morning we're talking the IMF. We've gone through the budget phase and all that, and we know that that's like the biggest thing, next biggest thing staring us in the face. And so we've got someone who is well versed in that area to help us, especially in understanding where we are, what the terms are for us in moving to the next step.
Well, joining us now, he's been there, he's done that. He's a former finance minister. I'm talking about Seth Terkper. He joins the conversation as Ghana is expected to get a staff-level agreement with the IMF that is come tomorrow. But what can we expect? Those are the matters we're dilating on with Seth Terkper and our other guest. Mr. Terkper, a very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Yeah, good morning to those of you in the studio. Good morning, Bernice, and
good morning.
Good morning to your viewers and listeners as well. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Very clear.
We can, sir. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, in fact, we know about some things you have forecast in the past, things you said that maybe a blind eye was turned to, which the chickens have now come home to roost, and we've ended up at the doorstep of the IMF. But would also like to look at your thoughts in terms of what we can even expect from this IMF deal. You have a package for us. I'd like you to share your thoughts on that quickly before we proceed with other aspects of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. May I know if you'll be showing this from the studio?
Yes, we'll do that for you, sir, from the studio.
Thank you very much, yes. So thank you very much. Yes, I did, by way of introduction, I did, write a number of articles. I also did, do, various radio and TV programs, including my series on PFM tax, warning about some of the trajectory, all the way back, I would say, from 2017. It sounded like sour grapes, regrettably, initially, but I thought that with time, well, I would say, frankly, that most people saw the perspective, which I was trying to show with respect to deficits, and the debt in particular, and the selective way in which we were showing certain numbers and thinking that we were doing fiscal consolidation. So I believe that that is what you are alluding to. Unfortunately, we are where we are, and we have to take, the hard and difficult bite in going through an IMF program, which no country wishes, but we all, most of the time, end up there, and I believe that will be the subject for our discussion. So I don't know if you lead, then I would know where to continue. But this is by way of introduction. Thank you.
Yes. So we've started with the key facts around the timing of selected sovereign debt workouts with IMF involvement. You can start from there, and you can call for maybe specific pages as we go on, so we can pick those specific pages for you, and we can run through this. And that will give some perspective to the conversation, sir.
Thank you very much. This is actually from, the IMF as a source and the World Bank. You will recollect that during the COVID, period, there was what we call the debt suspension scheme. This was discussed in Ghana because there was no less a person than the World Bank president had been persistent in asking Ghana to go for debt suspension. We said we wouldn't. Then even quite recently, when we were being urged to the IMF, he did mention, that we should have gone for debt suspension. That would have been helpful. Debt suspension is also virtually restructuring. Basically, that is what it means. You are being given the opportunity to suspend your debt by your creditors. But in this case, the difference is that we would have had the weight of the World Bank, the IMF, and the G20. Actually, it was a G20, group of 20 initiative. That is the world's, we'll say, wealthiest and then selected number of countries. It's been in the news, if you remember. If you would recall recently, where President Ramaphosa is asking for more representation of Africa on some of these groups. But we have the G7, which is the world's richest, and then the G20, and they sponsored the debt suspension scheme, and it simply meant that, they brought creditors for the sovereign countries to the table, and they prevailed on them, to waive the payment of debt while some restructuring took place. We did not take kindly to it. In fact, regrettably, we even contested, the World Bank president's position quite recently. But we are where we are. We missed that opportunity, and these are some of the outcomes. I think the lesson from here is that debt restructuring is not an easy task, because it shows, clearly that you could take quite a long time. But we are dealing with domestic, and I would hope that, we know that those at the table would see eye to eye with the government. But remember, we also have the external debt where we've done bonds, and that also would have to come in. And considering that, as we shall see in the next presentation, this is virtually a prior action, an action that you have to take, before, you have a full agreement, but also a scheme which the fund itself, which has lent money to Ghana and continues to lend money together to Ghana and the World Bank, which will be supporting the program, would have to make sure that Ghana is capable of paying them. So it's not just about other debtors, but we should remember that, these countries are also have given us loans, and so when you come to the multilateral loans and the rest, and we come to the point of either, non-payment, or, God forbid, as they say, default, they would also be part of the exposure. And so one of the, things we are being urged to do by the fund is to come to some agreement, that, we'll be able, to arrange, our affairs with those who lent money to us, including themselves, so that we do not default.
Are there any other slides you would like to call for so we can just finish dilating on those before we continue with the conversation?
Yeah, I sent one, considering that you wanted us to discuss, the process.
Right.
One which shows the process, and also in a bipartisan way. I used the recent enhanced credit facility, that's the ECF that we did from 2015. And I use examples from that to indicate, to show, usually there are conditions. So the conditions, as I mentioned, is prior actions, and then you also have, performance indicators or criteria, which you normally call PCs, and then you have structural, measures. So I picked from the recent ECF program that we did, and that is because it was the NDC that started it, and then following the elections in 2016, the NPP continued, with the program through 2018-19. I chose it because the initial stages, where we agreed at the initial stages, so that Ghanaians can, reflect on where we were then, which is the equivalent of where we are now in terms of securing, an agreement. And they are from the program documents. So I would hope that we would see this in a national interest and not as a program that was backed up on by one party.
All right. We'll get to the rest of those slides, Mr. Tekbe. We'll take a look at them. Our team will just get all of that projected so that we can have a good bite at them. But in the interim, how do you find it, especially when some 2 years ago, okay, you started talking about the fact that we were on the path of debt distress, that we ought to be careful in dealing with our fiscal issues and all of that, especially at a time when the World Bank's country director, Pierre Laporte, said that we were not on that path, that we did not risk debt distress. And somehow we've ended up here one more time, and we have to go to the doorstep of the IMF. When you think about that, some people would say that usually these Bretton Woods institutions are also not honest with us. What happened, Setape?
Yeah, thank you very much. The institutions have been, clear, and I believe that the country director was speaking to some statistics that was available to him. And so what I sought to do, in that tweet and in that news item I was carried, was to draw attention to the fact that the statistic that it was, using was the one which the government, was presenting. Let me just explain it. You will recall that in particular bailout costs, which is the energy sector costs, and then the energy sector, the banking sector bailout costs were being shown, not in calculating the debt and the deficit, but they were being shown as footnotes. And therefore, but we had never done that, because those, even though they are exceptional costs, you can say, for in the past, for subsidies, and then for critical events, like some of the debt associated with, on the cost side, associated with previous crises, like the global financial crisis, the bushfires and whatever. And I'm going back, to past administrations, as well as the revenue, particularly, during His Excellency Kufuor's era when we had the HIPIC, those exceptional costs and revenues were always shown and added to the deficit and to the debt. So to take them out, in the end, you would have to pay for them. And especially when we had taken money upfront, ESLA in particular, and we were showing the ESLA as revenue, boosting revenue, and therefore, the deficit is revenue minus expenditure. And you were excluding it from the expenditure when you were reflecting it as revenue, and you are taking a loan, and you are not completed. You were still owing. I thought was, a bit ingenious, and therefore I drew attention. I must say it wasn't just, that was 2 years ago, but this was something that started from 2017, particularly 2018. And I started pointing out that it will come to hunters because the question always was, yes, you may show it as a footnote, but is Bank of Ghana, taking account of it as a debt? The Ministry of Finance, that's the fiscal and monetary agencies. So eventually it doesn't matter what you show, it will end up being actual deficit and actual debt, and that is where we are today. To their credit, and that is why I said that I wasn't blaming the country director entirely because he was using certain statistics, but to their credit, in the 2019 Article 4.
But I have a little concern there. You're saying he was using our data, but oftentimes you would realize that the IMF, the World Bank, they have their own data on countries, some of them not necessarily coming from those countries themselves. So what happened in between?
Absolutely, and that's the point I was saying, that there was a major correction in 2019 when the Article 4 of the IMF was published. And that was when the ratings agencies, the IMF, the World Bank, and everybody came in sync and started adding, these costs in calculating our deficit, And so, as I said, we are prone to making, mistakes. That's why I said, I wasn't blaming, I was just drawing attention, But in the event that we continued and others continued, particularly in our national narrative, then I was saying that we were being complacent, in what we were doing. And eventually it will come, to hunters. And I think that is where, we are today. We all know our deficit situation. We know our debt situation. Unfortunately, it looks like even in the current budget, some of that is happening. But I'm told it is assumptions that are being made, in anticipation of the debt restructuring. The fact is, we are presenting an as-is statement as we speak, or as the budget was prepared. Yes,
right.
The budget is forecast and an estimate, but you have to be cautious when you are making estimates of expenditure. You err on the side of caution, and you don't create an optimistic, picture, about the process that we are going through.
So even now, just to wrap quickly on this point, so we can look at the slides and have a deeper conversation. So even now, you're saying that just like you said in 2019, that our fiscal deficit stood at 7.3%, not 3.9 or 4.5%. Even now, in our budget, there are still problematic areas, gray areas that we need to deal with in that as-is, circumstance that you refer to.
Yes, there are gray areas that needs to be explained because, for example, I see a technique that was used in 2017. You would remember in the 2017 budget, it was said that the administration of which I was a part, had left significant debt, and then there was an offset. And no less a person than His Excellency the President corrected it, the Minister for Finance corrected it. I see the same methodology being used in the current budget. And if that is the case, it will be unfortunate. But the important thing is that I think everybody's eye is wide open, and I wish there would be a better explanation. I stand for correction, and I would accept if an explanation is given, via the debt. I would only warn that, we should be careful in not anticipating that in calculating our deficit. One would have thought that, this will be explained, more explicitly.
Mr.
So
Tepe,
yes, that's
now, would like you to now take us through the the processes, what you put together, so that we have a better and a fair understanding. Then we can delve deeper into the concerns and issues raised.
The slides
Yes,
are
thank
ready
you.
now, so we'll put them on and then you can walk us through them.
Yes, please. Yes, so I have in two parts the steps, that we have to take in reaching an agreement and some of the conditions which are in IMF programs irrespective of countries. So we can move on quickly. Yes, so the first major step is what we are going through now. And that is what we would normally, say that, an IMF program, when we were being urged to go for an IMF program, there was much resistance. And let me also mention, that it's alleged that in 2014, thereabouts, personally, I resisted going to the fund program, where we had a belief that we could go through it. But when we were not getting budget support and the rest, we all came round, we went to Senchi, and I hope that is settled. So that was not actually, when we did a homegrown policy. But it is a right which you have as a member country of the IMF, but it will not be forced on you. And that is why some of us believe that we are at least 2 years too late, because, or even more, because in 2019, after the Article 4, it was quite clear that we were having problems before COVID. But even now, we still hear that narrative, and we seem to blame everything on COVID, Ukraine, and we had a gap of 3 to 5%. We don't have time, we can discuss that later on, which was clear from the Article 4. And then when we did you remember the COVID loan, that report also shows the 3 to 5% fiscal gap, which is what has caught up, with us. Now, we eventually made, the request, and once you make the request as a member country, then the fund will come. And you saw that, within a matter of days. Of course, His Excellency had been there, the finance minister had been there to meet with no less a person than the managing director. So I believe they were in readiness. So within 3 or 4 days or so, there was a team which will come and do a preliminary assessment, which precedes, the actual engagement to start the process of what we call negotiations to reach an agreement. Let me say that they do not come with a position of ignorance, because even as late as last year, 2021, and I cited some of this on some of your shows, there was Article 4 again, 2021. We can talk about the importance of Article 4 as we go along. There was Article 4, 2021, and there was a debt sustainability analysis in 2021, which shows that the situation was getting precarious, but again, we waited until now. So we are at that point, of the negotiations, and that is the staff visits, which will come first to a staff level agreement, which I explain in the next slide. So, excuse me. So what you have, up there, is you would reach a staff level agreement, which is basically saying that, we have had discussions, the fund is satisfied with the data and other statistics, that, they were given, and all this will be put together, and the key, as I said, we'll come to it, is that in the summary of that will be contained in what we call the letter of intent, which is the intention of the government to do an IMF program. And then there will be the Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy, which spells out the current situation of the economy, the measures that we intend, together with the fund, World Bank, African Development Bank, development partners, to resolve the crisis, both fiscal, monetary sector like energy, banking sector, and all that. That will be in what you call the Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy. And the letter with the memorandum as an attachment will be signed by the Minister for Finance and the governor on behalf of government, that's governor of the Bank of Ghana, on behalf of, government and the people of Ghana, that we are ready now to start the implementation. Of course, internally, there would have been cabinet, there would have been parliament, parliamentary approvals and others. This is the first major step, which is what the fund mission and the government is hoping to achieve. So what if we ask ourselves, what is it that will come out? Is the LOI, letter of intent, and then these are still drafts. Now, once that is done and agreed between government and the mission that is here, they will then carry it to the fund. And when they go to the fund has Africa department, European department, Middle East, and others fund. So we belong to the African department, obviously. So the Africa department will then, of course, they are engaged, but the management will then review it. And once they are satisfied and give approval, it doesn't mean that we are getting a program immediately. That document, will be sent, to in the press, to the press slide, please. It will be sent to all the other departments.
So let's go to the slide before. The slide before. So Tekpa is referencing the slide before. Let's quickly go to that.
So once that is done, but I hope that your viewers follow my narrative. Once that is done, it will go to the Africa department, and Africa department will then distribute it to departments that the fiscal affairs that deal with revenue, they deal with budget issues, and they deal with debt issues, and they will look at the document. Because remember, there are solutions, and it is the technical departments that would help in getting us out of the situation. Once they give their consent, they will raise some questions and others, and that could result in another round of discussions with the government. Not necessarily another face-to-face. These days it can be done via Zoom, and a lot of meetings have been taking place via Zoom or on the web. Okay, so we go to the next slide. Once these departmental comments are taken into account, it means that we are getting closer. The document will now be sent to the executive directors. By the executive directors, every country belongs to a directorship. And in Ghana, we belong to the directorship with Iran, with Afghanistan, with the Middle East. At the time of independence, when we became members, remember Ghana was the first, so there weren't many African countries. So when it comes to executive directorship, if our executive director is the executive director from Iran, so it will be distributed. And the reason why it is sent to their offices is that, remember, it is executive directors who are going to eventually approve the LOI and the Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Economic Policy. Let me say LOI and MEFP. I hope that's how we'll remember that. So that stage will be done, and when the executive directors have sent in their comments and everybody is agreed, then the documents will be sent to the IMF board. This process normally takes about 6 months or so. But in a situation where you have critical issues, remember, like the debt arrangements that we are going through now, which is critical for even a board meeting, it could be longer. And this is why, we would hope that, those processes, would go through as quickly as possible. Typically, you have others at the table, particularly the World Bank, because the World Bank is a sister institution, the Bretton Woods institution, if you remember. And so the document would also go to the World Bank board. It will go to African Development Bank board. These two, I mentioned these two because these are the institutions which are at the table in the discussions, and often we hear about the fund, but they are the ones who give budget support. The IMF typically gives balance of payment support. But one of the things that I've sold, in essence, you can say that the IMF loan is for balance of payment support to strengthen the currency, right? Through Bank of, so that goes to Bank of Ghana. And in the past, it's Bank of Ghana that has paid that debt. The debt that, the Ministry of Finance pays, because they use it to manage, the balance of payment. That the Ministry of Finance pays is the World Bank, African Development Bank, a development partner budget support, loan. I think that in recent times, beginning with the ECF, we have gone to the board for waiver and to use some of that money for budget support. This is why some of us keep saying that our expenditure is high, because even monies that traditionally goes to Bank of Ghana, we go to the board. For example, the SDR and the COVID loan, where we went to the board entirely to use them for budget support instead of, substantially going to, to central bank to strengthen the city. And that also explains, you see the linkage, why we are having problems.
Right.
City.
Yeah, Mr.
So
Takwe, quickly. So the next one has to do with steps to reaching an agreement. Then we'll quickly move on to the typical conditions. There's a lot to cover, so just
yes, please. Yes.
Quickly do that for us.
Thank you very much. So we are at this point where, all this, would have been done, and let us assume that everything has gone successfully. The board, gives approval. The question is, what does the board approve? What are the key elements? And there are 3 of them, so I think we can move on to the next slide. So you have what you call prior actions, which is actions that you must take even before. So we can say that is a matter of good faith, that you would fulfill, those things even before an agreement, is reached, and that's the first one. So again, later on, I think it can be made available. We go back, or I can refer viewers, and particularly those who are interested, to go to these documents are available on the IMF, website. So in our case, the main, prior, we can go on place. Yes. Let me just cite a couple. We agreed on a fiscal consolidation. Remember that the 2015 agreement came ahead of the budget, the discussions. And so the prior actions were things which we, coming from the homegrown policy, had said that, we would do, including a deficit, bringing it down to 5.3. When we, by 2013, because of single spine and other subsidy, the deficit was around 10%. So we were bringing it down already, and we had agreed that we'll bring it down to 5.3. And together, there are quite a number of them. We can't run through all of them. So these were things which we did. So you can see that at the time of going to the IMF, program and signing those documents I mentioned, those things have been done. And that was why we had in the document completed, Now, so those are the prior actions, things we saw, for example, the debt situation, and then certain discussions. For example, one of the things which we had to do, remember we went to zero financing by Bank of Ghana. We know today Bank of Ghana is heavily financing, the budget. I'm giving by way of one example, which is certainly going to come. Government should show a path for raising revenue by itself and cutting expenditure to reduce the deficit, so that we depend less on Bank of Ghana to finance the deficit. So those are some of the one example of a likely prior action, together with the debt situation which we are talking about. But these were the prior actions that we had to payroll, interministerial. Remember, single spine was a major issue back then. Before we even started the fund program, we had agreed with labor, that we'll pay the arrears in 3 years. So that we indicated was progress, and we indicated that certain actions were going to be taken, and that is what we have there. Next, please. So we can go to the performance criteria, please. Yes, so the performance criteria and indicative targets. The performance criteria are things which you want to do, throughout the period of the program. In the case, at the time of negotiation, you can see it's 2015 to 2017, because we wanted it to overlap the election year, to show that we can hold on, to fiscal discipline and monetary prudence. And so it was up to 2017, but it was extended, as I said, to 2018 and 2019. So you have, a floor, primary fiscal balance, that is the budget. We're talking about the budget being sound. We're talking about Bank of Ghana the reserve situation and others, over the 3 years, we'll make sure that the CD value will take steps to strengthen it. The reserves will be boosted, and various, wages, as I said, and all those things. Once we had completed some, it didn't mean that single spine we need was over. It didn't also mean that, we needed, we would then be relaxed, but the wage level was still high as it is today. And so we wanted to show that, and one of the things we did, if you remember, was to go to real sector to create jobs, through infrastructure, instead of putting all employment prospects, heavily on the public sector. Next, please. So these are examples. And when it comes to performance criteria, you have the quantitative. There are things which you must show in numbers, that you are capable of achieving. Now, this was 2015, and this was reflecting some of the things which ended up in the 2015 budget and then on into 2016. But again, it's not new because our budget shows a medium-term perspective. So they are just looking at, since we have a 3-year medium-term perspective, the fund will go through and make sure that step by step, we will be able to come to fiscal discipline and monetary discipline. So this is why they said they are called performance, your performance during the program. And it is this which will be reviewed normally every 6 months. And that's where we talk about first review, second review. In the case of this particular ECF, there were 8 reviews, the 7th and 8th by the time we ended. And the reviews are critical because unlike the COVID loan where we were giving the money upfront, most of the IMF money, the World Bank money and others, will be released in tranches based on how you perform, so it's not going to be easy money coming in immediately, but it's going to span, assuming we have a 3 years. So if we're asking for 3 billion, the 3 billion will not be given to us immediately. Of course, we'll have the World Bank and others coming in, but it will be spread. And this as and when you achieve this. Next, please. So, but then remember, you are being helped out of the current situation, but you also need the structural reforms. The essence of the structural reforms is that you are, for example, a good example, let me be very practical. You remember we created GRA, we merged Internal Revenue Service and the VAT service to create a domestic tax division. We did the customs and what we call ACOMS now, single window. We did all of those things. These were all measures which were in the homegrown policy, and we indicated that we are going to follow. GIFMIS, for example, is another example. The sinking fund to manage debt, the stabilization fund, which we had already included, as a country in the PRNA. We brought all of these to show the fund that these are structural measures which we will be implementing, and hopefully we will not be returning or winning ourselves of the fund and not be running, to the fund all the time. So the structural measures are very important, and they would also, be monitored. And I would hope that in the interest of the country, we would have these structural measures revisited, because many of them, have, for example, off-budget expenditure and the rest, they would all now have to come in. Okay. So I think this summarizes what I wanted to present. The slide is there, so maybe we can scroll through quickly, but basically this is what it means. So you have measures, fiscal, you have monetary measures, you have measures in the real sector. For example, the energy sector debt, for which we had ESLA, but unfortunately have still not finished paying. Some lingering banking sector debt, arrears owed to contractors. You see, it's a repetition of virtually the same old things. And that's why I'm just going through them. Negotiations, with labor to make sure that we know precisely the liability of government. These are all going to be part of the measures. And then we have to do, like we started with the payroll measures, removing ghost names and the rest. Those are the structural measures. So as you go into the structural measures, they go into deeper things that you want to do. Sometimes new things, like infrastructure fund and other things, so that will bring the situation under control.
Right. Thank you very much for taking us through this. But it's interesting the way you conclude your presentation, and I would just like to briefly read that out. You say that these are inevitable. The third point, crisis is inevitable and we underestimate or ignore to expect them at our own peril. The time to prepare for crisis is now. You mentioned earlier that, you know, these things are due to events and happenings, internal and external, that are now occurring within some 2 to 3 year period. Initially, they used to happen over a longer duration, so countries have time to prepare. Even if they went for a program, after they completed the program, they had some time to prepare before any other shocks or whatever come. Let me just take your quick thoughts on the debt exchange program and linking that to this and the possibility. Some have raised concerns that, look, this appears to be problematic. Already there are concerns that key stakeholders were not engaged. Are we likely to see more delays if the program doesn't become as successful as government wants? Your quick thoughts on that.
Yes, it will definitely lead to delay because, as I said, the bank, the fund and the bank who are going to be giving budget support, development partners. Remember, if we take, you know, money from USAID, it's a US government money, assuming it's a loan. If it's a grant, it's a grant. But, you know, for you to even get future grants, you have to, you know, carry, you know, your affairs well. So yes, if we do not reach agreement, you know, it will be worrisome because it means that the support that the economy requires will not be coming quickly. But I'm linking this to the fact that, you know, the tendency for saying my crisis is bigger than yours, you know, my COVID is bigger than your gas supply from Nigeria not coming in, my crisis is bigger than, you know, your single spine, my crisis is bigger than the, you know, the global financial crisis, which was the worst crisis, or the cocoa farms that bent during the Rawlings era and all that. You know, yes, it's important to measure crisis and say this is big or this is small, Ebola and all the rest. But the important thing is how well are you prepared for the next crisis? And that's the point I'm making, that one of the lessons we have come to learn, which countries, you know, do, is what you call counter-cyclical policies. You know, so you look at if crisis should come tomorrow, and there will be crisis. Nobody anticipated Ukraine. We were all coasting, you know, well, post-COVID recovery, and how it was going to be robust. People were thinking about inflation and the rest. You know, then out of the blue, the war came, right? And it's having its own ramifications. So preparing for the crisis is very important. And this is the reason, you know, we started the stabilization fund. Remember when we had COVID, we went to the stabilization fund because we said never again. We set up the sinking fund to pay for the first sovereign bond, 550 million from our own oil revenue and the rest. Today, all these things are going to be zero, despite having 3 oil fields. Is it because we thought that we would not face any crisis again, that these things have come down to zero, that we started borrowing again, you know, to epic level? So the point I'm making there, which I've always often made, you know, in other fora, is that crises are inevitable. And the countries that are able to stomach crisis are the ones that prepare for crisis. And you don't prepare for crisis during, you know, the period of the crisis, as we are doing now. You go to the farm. It's inevitable. We resisted it. But then if when crude oil prices are high, if when cocoa prices are high, if when gold prices are high, you put some of them aside in the stabilization fund, you put some aside to reduce the debt, then you'll be able to manage small crises, little crises. And then it's only the big ones that you end up going to ask, you know, the fund, and it has less effect, you know, on your economy. After all, as members of the, as members of the IMF, we could always go, but some go for what you call standby. That is standby credit, where you get and you pay as quickly as possible, like Portugal, Ireland, and the rest during the global financial crisis. But the lesson they learned was that Greece and they never went back to the IMF during COVID. Right. So without preparing for crisis, you would also always end up, you know, at the IMF.
Right, and we can also learn from the example of the UK itself, England to be specific, when they went to the IMF in the 80s and never went back there. But so I have 5 questions for you that I want to put into 2 batches very quickly. The first 2, so on the back of all that you've said and the writing on the wall, so to speak, the things you said about where we were heading, did we learn any lessons from your administration going to the IMF? Did this administration, does it appear they learned any lessons from that? Because, I mean, it's a continuum. Wisdom says you don't repeat other people's mistakes. You learn from the mistakes. Did we learn? And secondly, Bright Simmons on Twitter has been talking about this IMF deal and things that could obstaculate it, so to speak, using that word in a very loose sense. He says the government of Ghana has put the IMF in a great quandary or confusion. The government says it has shown enough commitment to the prior actions requirement, and thus it would be a betrayal if the IMF leaves town next week without a staff agreement signed. Yet, commitment is not achievement. He goes on to say, after extensive analysis of all the data so far, Imani foresees one of the following outcomes shortly. 1, IMF end of mission announcement of staff agreement subject to management approval and board approval in April 2023, and government gets what it wants, but no deal until prior actions are done. And 2, I'll end with 2. IMF's end of mission announcement confirms understanding with the authorities on several critical matters, but staff agreement will be pending alignment on certain important prior actions. Referral to the board deferred until further talks in Washington, D.C. What do you make of all of that? So, were the lessons learned, and what do you think about Bright Simmons' thoughts?
Let me take the last one first quickly.
Right.
I agree. And it's basically, where we are likely to be. We do not have a categorical position. And I say that because, as a Ghanaian, unlike the homegrown, which we went to Century, we discussed, it was on media, media were there and everything, conclusions. We do not know where Ghana stands. Somebody is negotiating on our behalf and assuring us. You can't shift the blame to the fund. That will not shake the fund, because the fund is ruled by rules and we have been members of the fund. So if we are convinced that we have done enough, let us put it to Ghanaians. And this is the point. Remember when he said that we had an enhanced program to get us out of the situation, we were not going to the fund. We were saying, let us see it and discuss it, because we also, thank God some of us can read the numbers and the rest, But coming back to the second, so I agree entirely with those alternatives. I don't think we should be looking to a categorical position that will reach staff level agreement, particularly because we had never, if you remember, we had come out of HIPIC and where the debt was going up, but we had set up the sinking fund and others, which we included in the structural measures and whatever. So there is nothing, there was a book during the global financial crisis which said that this time is different. And it says that the lesson for governments is that always they say, my time is different from somebody else's time. And the conclusion of the book, which went into statistics all the way to the 1930s, is that this time is never different. Yes, Ghana learned a lot. And even before we talk about IMF, it wasn't the IMF or the World Bank that pushed us, if you remember, for that 1.5 years of discussion of what do we want to do with oil, which we didn't do with gold and with cocoa. The product of that is clear, the PRMA. Nobody pushed us to do the PRMA. We only said that let's use the oil revenue to tackle some of the difficulties that we have. And if I may go through quickly, a part of it goes to the budget. Even 70% of what goes to the budget should be for infrastructure, out of which we created the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund together with other revenues. 2, because commodity prices go up and down, and when they are down, then we are in trouble, then we go borrowing and whatever, let us set up a stabilization fund, so that when the times are good, you put money aside. And then when the times are bad, you draw down on it. With 3 oil fields, and when the times were good between 2017 and if you grant 2019, we never actually increased it. What was in it prior to that is the $250 million that we withdrew for COVID. Today, if another crisis should hit, we've not learned that lesson because we've depleted it. Sinking fund, as I said, $550 million, was used to pay the Kufuor bond because we had not prepared. We were paying on the interest, just as what we are doing now. Now, the entire 2015 bond, which was the subject of discussion in Parliament, let me remind, the entire 2015 bond, which the World Bank gave the guarantee, was used to refinance, the debt, the domestic debt in particular for single spine and the rest, and that is why we underlay it with the sinking fund, so that we said, let us gradually, like Philippines and others do, as we borrow, we must learn to pay. When you borrow standard loans, we pay principal. When we go for sovereign bond, there's nothing that says that you shouldn't be paying down. And so we were actually buying our own bonds from the London and other stock exchanges. We had the right to do it. And that's how we, in fact, 200 million of that 550 million was used by the NPP, government, current administration, to pay the balance. We had left it in the sinking fund. They used it on October 4th, 2017,
right,
to pay the Kufuor bond, the balance on the first sovereign, His Excellency, President Kufuor's bond. So again, we did not. Nobody pushed us to do that. So we had learned lessons from the past, particularly from the global financial crisis, which lasted about a decade. So I think we should just go back to that. I believe we were on the right path, because the statistics is there. We don't have time to show.
And that's precisely the point.
The rate at which we were borrowing was going down.
Right. Just these. Let me also acknowledge that we have Professor Lord Mensah. Prof, a very good morning to you.
Prof, good morning.
Good morning to our listeners.
All right. Just hold for me, Prof. We'll wrap shortly with Seth Tekpe, and we'll have an extensive conversation with you as well. I just want to find out, Seth Tekpe, so 3 key points. We've spoken about how we ended up here, but some of the metrics, our exchange rates, the Ghana cedi plummeted against the dollar, becoming the worst performer. Now it is the best performer, so to speak, against the American greenback. I think the last time I checked, it was around 12 cedis, 80 pesos. What do you make of that? Does that mean that the right measures are being put in place by the Bank of Ghana, among others? Is that something that can be sustained? Then there's also the bit about Dr. Kwabena Dufour, who is proposing a rescue team to solve Ghana's economic challenges. And just to give you an idea, he says this is non-political. It shouldn't be a political team. It should rather be a team that includes non-political elements, experienced bankers, insurance executives, successful business people, university professors in banking and business, and others. Is that the solution, or one of the solutions? Quickly on those 2 points.
That was Senchi. That was Senchi was about. Even the NPP at the time was invited, and they boycotted it. But some members of the NPP came on their own. It brought academics, it brought everybody to Senchi. So what is being said, we had a precedent already. And then back during the Rawlings era, there was one that was done quietly in North Carolina. May he rest in peace, Dr. Butwe, Misata, and others. There was something that was done in North Carolina, sponsored by USAID, to talk quietly, about the policies that were going to go into the then ERP SAP, and where we were. So there are precedents, to this. When we had single spine, we brought labor to the table. It wasn't only labor which were who, other people came in, media, everybody, and we brainstormed, we put the facts down, and So yes, I agree, to that. That is what we have been. The strength of the cedi is transit, because remember,
it is what? Did he say transitory?
It's transit, because I say it's transit because we have the period when we had the poor money, and remember, oil prices have shot up and it's now going down. Which is when we build the stabilization fund and the rest. So I hope that, as I said, when the time is good, we are putting some of the money. Now it's very difficult, but as we stabilize with the fund, we can go back and put in these structural measures. Without those structural measures, without infrastructure, without, growing the economy, we would go back.
Just a quick follow-up. I didn't mean to follow up. So when you say it's transient, do you mean that maybe after some things happen or do not happen, for example, the IMF deal, the cedi could start losing ground again to the dollar? Just quickly on that.
No, the IMF deal, we should clean a deal, because that also will support. But I'm saying that those are one time. Remember, let me make a point. Ghana has received $6 billion or more, from 2020 on account of COVID. $6 billion. I'm not talking Ghana cedis. The IMF itself, which is at the table today, gave us $2 billion SDR and COVID loan. Yes, it's a loan, but it is resources that came in. The World Bank, China, and everybody gave us money. Why didn't we use that? And it is far bigger. Those amounts are bigger collectively than all the IMF programs that we did in the past. Then during 2020, remember before we stopped going, we had $2 billion, but we couldn't go for the $3 billion. If you added $8 billion, what is it that is eating the economy? Such that these big sums of money, no government had done, even no government got support explicitly and say this is for your crisis since the Rawlings era. It is only this administration that got all these monies that we are talking about. So again, I'm saying that the inflow of money, 1 billion or whatever, and saving the situation, that is it. No. And the mistake of saying that, we borrowed to provide forests. You don't borrow to provide forests. You borrow to pay your loans, right? So I'm saying that we should stop these measures. That's the extent to which I'm saying some of them could be trusted because they will pass. But if you don't have the means, that's why, for example, we created the Exim Bank as one of the measures to help the non-traditional sector, to bring in forex in a more orderly manner, the way Cocoa Board, helps, cocoa farmers. Cocoa Board itself is on its knees.
Mr. Akakpo, so let's hold it here for now. So we also have Professor Lord Mensah Bernice and interesting perspectives that Mr. Akakpo has given us.
Exactly.
Let's hear from
through the formulation of the IMF program, what we'll need, the actions, the prior actions, and all the criteria. Thank you so much, Mr. Akakpo, for spending time with us here this morning. Prof, so... Hello, Mr. Akakpo. Were you saying something?
I said, if you don't mind, I'd like to stay on listening to Prof.
Right, that's okay. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Prof, so, government says it's hoping to reach a staff-level agreement by December 13. That's just a few days away. But as Mr. Akakpo has taken us through the processes, it doesn't mean we are out of the woods yet. What are you picking? If you're picking up any information, is this a possibility, the 13th of December? And if it so happens, what is the idea of how fast we can go through the other processes to ensure that we get our economy back on its feet?
Yeah, well, 13th is just, I think, tomorrow or today. Today is on the 12th. So if it's 13th, then it's tomorrow. So far, I have not gotten any signal. But such questions, it should have, channeled to those who are sitting, right in the strong room, dealing with IMF. But then, with my expectations, if in case it should go through, I will send a positive signal out there. And I think if we don't get the staff-level agreement, we cannot make headway with our external debt restructuring that we're looking at. Because even though we have had an announcement going out there for the local domestic restructuring, we may need some policy credibility from the IMF to start negotiating with our external creditors. So effectively, if it goes through and we're able to get a staff-level agreement, it's a good signal. It is a good signal. It will give some hope into the economy as to, because if you look at the history, we are more financially disciplined when we hang on with the IMF program. Anytime we find ourselves in the IMF program,
right, we
seem to be financially prudent. And so it would be a very good signal if we should get that level of agreement with them. The signal would be good.
Right. So GUTA, the Ghana Union of Traders Association, has commended government and the Bank of Ghana for the performance of the cedi against the dollar. Do you think this is a sign of good things to come? And could it have an impact on how fast we're able to, or is it indicative in any way of something good we're doing, and could it have an impact on our program?
Of course, there is something good that we are doing, but then it's not going to be a permanent, solution to our city problem. I always attribute, the trajectory of the forex market to three things. One, is the fundamental, that economy, hinges on. The second one is the seasonal drive of the cedi against the dollar. And then the last one is the speculative, drive. I think what is happening now is that the speculative drive is toning down a bit, with the measures being put in place by the Bank of Ghana, and then government coming out to give some assurance into the economy, and then possibly the people themselves who have given up on possibly trading in the economy as we speak now. And so that is controlling the speculative drive. The seasonal drive, I would say, has not gone yet because we are in the festive season. There is an anticipation that in the first quarter of next year, you will get people, businesses that putting pressure on the dollar again because they will demand to store up inventory, But then the fundamental has not been touched on yet, and with the depreciation that we are enjoying now, the appreciation that we are enjoying now, I can say that it is, as a result of the measures to control the speculative, drive of cedi. As we move towards that 15, point something to the dollar, 15 Ghana cedis to the dollar, there were some speculative components. And now that we've had some measures from the Bank of Ghana, that is going to come down to find a natural level. The natural level will be that, because if you look at this economy over the past few months now, to borrow to finance existing debt and also some assets to shore up our dollar buffer, we've not been able to have access to the Eurobond market. And so we've been priced out of that market. And as a result of that, Ghana's economy is now being managed in its natural state, more or less, let me put it that way, without an inflow from the, debt that we normally issue. So the cedi will definitely find its natural level, and I believe that is what we are seeing now. If we don't work out the fundamentals, we may go back to where we were, as it was some few weeks ago.
Right, Prof. Let me bring in Dr. Theo Champong via Zoom now. Doc, Mr. Seth Terkper just gave us a presentation running us through the IMF program, what we'll need, the prior actions and all that. But in concluding, he mentions what you and other experts have had reason to complain about how our engagement with the IMF has been repetitive. But he ends by saying that we need to prepare for crisis, whether big or small. For you as a political risk analyst and looking at where we are as a country, what will that major step or steps be, even through this IMF program, in indicating that preparedness for crisis? Sorry. Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Now, just saying good morning, and Uncle Seth is absolutely right. As a country, we've been living from hand to mouth, to put it in very, blunt terms, that we haven't built enough buffers to sustain us through the shocks that often then come. And the reality also is that in the world that we live in now, in fact, there would be more of such external shocks coming. And so if you don't put your house in order, then you're always going to be found wanting when those challenges do come. So the question then is, how do we put our house in order? There are both short-term and more medium to long-term measures or interventions that we need to put in place. But one of which fundamentally is growing the economy in a way and manner that it trickles down to the ordinary Ghanaian. So it's not just then a question of exporting raw materials, but the proverbial value addition and seeking to increase both our primary balance, but ultimately getting our budget to be run on a surplus basis and not on a deficit basis. That's more long to medium term. And within that, also, of course, making sure that we have a very clear import substitution strategy to ensure that we can at least, grow some of the things that we need within the economy ourselves to consume without necessarily spending hard import dollars to bring them within it. But in the short term, it comes down to some of the cuts or the austerity that we should be expecting as part of this IMF program. The government has already indicated bits of it in the 2023 budget, but the real test would be to what extent, if any, they would be able to commit or stick to the measures that they have proposed in the budget. And that's where some of us really have concerns, because historically, if you look at most of our budget projections and the numbers, we always over-project on revenue, but under-project on expenditure. And every time you come the end of the year, you have this big gap between those revenue estimates, which never really materialize, and then the expenditure side, which we always end up, overspending. That's the perennial issue that I think we need to address.
Right.
Other than that, all these external shocks will continue to expose us.
Doc, there are those who believe that the world is structured in such a way that it will be difficult for countries like ours to reach the level of independence when it comes to our finances that first world countries have reached. Time and time again, different governments, different administrations have these elaborate plans on how we can, as a country, you mentioned export and import more, less, export more, so that we can bring in more revenue. They talk about Ghana Beyond Aid, very ambitious plans. Is this the case that we are just not able to do things right when it comes to managing our own affairs, or really there is a problem when it comes to countries like ours wanting to break off the shackles of dependence?
I refuse to accept the latter point, that there are sort of bigger forces, or to quote and unquote the president's own words, there are malevolent or evil forces at play, which keeps preventing countries like Ghana from making it. Because even within our own sub-region, there are other countries like Botswana or like Mauritius or Seychelles and others that have attained a very high level of development progress, if you measured it by the human development indicators. So it tells you really that a large part of the problem, and therefore the solution, is internally driven. And it comes down to the quality of the policy-making process that we have in the country. In other words, the politics that we practice and the underlying governance structures is really what has led us to where we are now. So if we can largely address and fix the politics, if we can largely ensure that the policies that we're implementing are grounded and the evidence base is actually solid to support it and drive it, then I think we'll be making progress, because those external forces and the external environment would always be there. And other countries have been able to develop or make it with or without those external forces. I talked about even in Africa, but our East Asian counterparts that we started off with also faced similar challenges, and they were able to overcome. So I don't really subscribe to the view that there are these external forces that are hindering us as a country from progressing, because even within our own region, others have made much better progress than us, and it's because of the internal choices that we have made as a people.
Interesting. Right, at this point, we'd just like to bring in a next guest. I'll just ask all of you to kindly permit us bring in the BOG, because there are some new introductions to our one Ghana cedi coin that we'd like more information on, and then we will take your thoughts on that as well and wrap up the conversation quickly. Mr. Dominic Owusu is Head Cash Processing Operations, Currency Management Department at the Bank of Ghana. Thank you, sir, for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers.
Right. So, why is it important that we have the new Ghana cedi coin?
Good. So, first of all, we're looking at currency management function of the central bank. And with the currency management functions, I think it involves a number of activities, all aimed at ensuring the availability of cash for transactions. And so these activities are also aimed at ensuring the functionality of the banknotes and public trust and confidence in the currency. So generally, the central bank continues to have an eagle-eye view of cash activities in the economy. In doing so, we monitor currency in circulation, cash demand, its evolution, trends in the demand, the currency structure, and threats to the cash. Now, everything that we do must be done to ensure cost effectiveness and efficiency. If you look at the one Ghana cedi coin, it was introduced into circulation in 2007. And since its introduction, the stock of the one Ghana cedi coin that the central bank must maintain for its normal operations has been depleted. So since its introduction in 2007, we've been doing operations with the coins that were minted in 2007, and the stock has currently been depleted. And as part of our normal operations,
just a quick interjection, Mr. Owusu. Benjamin here. When you say the stock has been depleted, please explain further for lay people. What exactly does that mean?
So as part of the function of the central bank, we must make sure that cash is available. So when you go to a bank and you need cash for transactions, you must have it. So as part of our normal activities on an annual basis, the central bank must ensure that cash is available. So we look at growth in the economy, we look at cocoa, we do forecasting. So central bank has a tried and tested robust models that it uses to look at do gap analysis and make sure that we normally print money to make sure that we can contain the activities of the economy. So on a yearly basis, we need to make sure that cash which is bad, which we remove from circulation, growth, all activities we do a gap analysis and make sure that we have currency to meet those requests. So in the same way, when with the one Ghana cedi, we realized that the stock of cash or coins that we have in our vault has gone down. It is very low, and it will not be able to meet our projected cash demand. So when I say it's depleted, it means that your stock of cash that you have in the vault has gone extremely low, below what you can use for your normal activities.
And it's gone extremely low due to?
The economy is expanding, people use the coins.
Right.
And so because of that, you don't want people to come, we want one Ghana cedi coin, and they don't have it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So can you vividly describe this new one cedi coin to us?
Okay, so the one Ghana cedi coin, because let's appreciate that this is not new. It is an upgraded version of the new coin. So the coin that we have, which we've been using, because of old technology that was used to produce the coins in 2007, if in 2021, 2022, you want to issue or restock, you cannot go back to the old technology. So it means that you must use the existing technology, which is robust enough, and then also meet modern standard, advanced technological standard. And you also have to look at what threats is there. That is why technology has given us this opportunity. So first of all, the coin, the image, or the iconographic images of the old and new are the same. So if you look at the coin, the front and the back of the coin, the coat of arms, and then the scale of justice, they are the same for both the 1 Ghana city coin, the old and the upgraded. How? The old and upgraded. Am I still online, please? Hello?
Hello, Mr. Owusu, you are. We can hear you clearly.
Fantastic. Okay, so the old and the new are the same. However, there are 3 levels of security that every currency must have. We must have the public features, the commercial bank features. So the public features, we call it level 1. The commercial bank features, we call it level 2. And the central bank features, we call it level 3. In 2007, they had their own technology at the time. So now, the number 1 public recognition feature on the coin is what we call the latent image. So under the scale of justice, there is a block. And within this block, if you tilt the coin left and right, you will see a radiating star image, which you switch to the symbol 1 Ghana cedi sandwiched between 2 small stars. And that we call is the number 1 public recognition feature, and it's below the scale of justice. Secondly, this coin, like the old coin, is also bimetallic. It means that there are 2 different metals. In the old coin, we have the middle area, which is gold, and the outer area is silver. With the upgraded coin, there's a switch. The middle is silver, and the outer is gold. That is one distinct feature. Also, when you look at the upgraded coin, the edges is serrated, and it is rough in serration. So the serrations or the roughness is more pronounced than the old coin. So if you look at the new coin, you see that the edges are more pronounced and it is rough.
Right.
Now, other things that you will not see is that this coin has a more defined machine readability. It means that when you take it to the commercial banks and they are using machines to receive these coins, the reception of the machine, the signal is very pronounced. And also, even if you melt these coins, there's also a feature in it which we call the high security feature. If somebody goes to melt the coin and I come there and I do some analysis of the coin, I can say that this is the coin that was introduced by Bank of Ghana. So they are quite very, very distinct feature that makes this coin very...
Mr. Owusu, there are issues about the timing of the circulation of these upgraded notes. And while you answer that, just let us know when we'll start seeing this coin in circulation.
So the coins are due to be put into circulation today. That was our announcement. So it will be put into circulation on the 12th of December 2020. So today, you should be able to see the coins in circulation.
Is it that we are going to see them in circulation, or we should be able to see them in circulation? Which is it? If people were to go to the banks today and say they wanted the new 1 Ghana cedi coin, would they get it?
Okay, so they should get it, but I don't think that it's every branch of the commercial bank which may have it. We expect all of them to have it, but it's not a showstopper.
Right,
so the right. Go today.
Right, so there are also concerns about the timing of this circulation and whether it feeds into any of the major economic structural reforms that are happening.
Okay, so on that note, I think that as a central bank, we must make sure that the velocity of cash. So when we talk about velocity of cash and exchangeability, it means that when somebody does a transaction and wants a change, the person must have change. When somebody wants to price to any level, you don't have to create that room for people to say that because there is no change, we cannot do ABC. So currently, I think that if you look at what is in circulation, you realize that the 1 Ghana cedi note. So let me come back a little. To issue a 1 Ghana cedi bank.
So, Mr. Owusu, let me just make this a little. We're pressed for time. We need to address this. So while you go on, just make it very brief for us, please.
So to issue a 1 Ghana cedi banknote and to issue a coin, it is the same cost. In the cost analysis, it is the same, almost the same cost to issue a note and to issue a coin. And as part of our transactions, we are always ensuring that we have stock of these notes and coins to meet economic activity. So if you want to issue, and then when you issue 1 cedi note in circulation, it only stays in circulation for less than 6 months, 8 months, not more than 1 year. So the coins stay in circulation. I think you can look at 2007, since we started after redenomination, these coins have been in circulation. So if you would today issue a banknote, 1 cedi banknote, then it is economically wise and cost effective to do the same thing in the coin. Right. That is why the central bank is issuing these coins.
Okay. Mr. Owusu, my final bit to you, and then we shall take reactions from our 3 guests and call this discussion a wrap. It's interesting. I had penned down something, and you just spoke about paper money or cloth money, which is what it really is, or coin money. In printing currency, there is cost. What are going to be the financial implications of this on our country? I'm sure lots of people will be curious because of our precarious economic situation. What is it looking like? How much are we going to cough up in order to get these sums of money, the coins?
Okay, so I think initially I indicated that as part of our transaction, our daily activities, we have to make sure that cash is available. That one, you cannot do anything about it. When somebody gets to the bank and needs money, it must be available as a legal tender, and that must be satisfied. So whatever you do, as part of our operations, cash must be made available. But in doing so, it must be done in an efficient and cost-effective manner. So if Bank of Ghana sees that in doing so, if you continue to issue banknotes and these banknotes have to be removed from circulation, if you look at the quality or the nature of 1 Ghana cedi banknotes, because of the velocity, those banknotes are used for transactions at a low level. And because of the tropical nature we find ourselves in, and because of the velocity of cash, these banknotes become deteriorated quite early. So because of that, you would have to use a cost-effective way, which is the coin, to be able to save the country a lot of money. I don't think that you want to go to a bank and say that you need money and it's not available. You can see the kind of problem it will create. But in doing those operations, how best can the currency management function be operated to make sure that we save the country money? Right. And this is exactly what the central bank has done.
Finally to you, Mr. Owusu, do I get a sense then that we are trying to phase out the paper or cloth notes in exchange for these ones when it comes to the lower denominations? Because it appears also that the 2 cedi note is not in circulation as much.
So I think that instead of saying cloth, we say cotton.
Cotton
band.
Okay,
yes,
sure.
Thank you. So I think that the central bank has indicated that it is gradually phasing out the 1 Ghana cedi banknotes. However, it is still a legal tender. It is legal because it's the central bank which has the sovereign authority and mandate to issue notes that has issued it. It hasn't demonetized those banknotes. And of course, tender because it has to be accepted in when it is offered. So we maintain that the 1 Ghana cedi banknote and the 2 Ghana cedi notes are still legal tender and must be accepted for transactions. However, the central bank has made a clear statement that it is gradually reducing to save money on the issuance of the banknotes, the 1 Ghana cedi banknotes and the 2 Ghana cedi banknotes.
All right. Mr. Owusu, I don't know whether you'd like to stay with us as our 3 other guests, just have brief reflections on this bit. Or do we still have Professor Mensah, Dr. Theo Champong, and Sir Tepe? Okay, so 30 seconds for each of you on this matter. And I'm just holding you, Mr. Owusu, so that in case they say something you need to clarify, you can do that. I'll start with you, Sir Tepe. Okay, let's start with Dr.
Yes, thank
Champong.
you very much. Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, I think in the economy, things should evolve, and that's the context in which I see this. But I've been making a difference between accountability, and the independence of the central bank. And yes, we are seeing this. I hope that, as some are alleging, it is not part of the trend towards monetization. There is weight also. The coins are usually waiting for transactions and the rest. And I hope that there will be a balance, in terms of the notes, and then the new currency. But the bigger point I wanted to make is, when I mentioned this, is the central bank itself has been heavily financing the deficit in the context of the discussions, and it's going to be part of, the IMF. Definitely there will be benchmark and other things, to scale down. Remember, we came to zero financing of the budget. I'm not sure if Dominic is in a position to, but I will ask that since the deficit is approved by Parliament, we have the Appropriation Fund, the Appropriation Act, and all those things. There is a linkage with the fiscal, and this is why I make a distinction between independence and accountability. We should be moving towards, the US, the UK, where there's no restraint on the, there's even a compulsion on the part, of the governor to appear before, if not the whole house, the committee, the finance committee,
right,
and other relevant committees, to give some accountability, to what is, what the government, what the central bank has been actively involved,
okay,
when it comes to some of the issues,
right,
that we are discussing today. So it might look like, a different trend towards what Dominic is, but I just want to put things in context. The central bank is heavily, for example, it's projected that the central bank would have financed about 40 billion or so,
Mr. Tepe, I think those details we'll get into some other time. But grateful that you could join us for this long conversation. Mr. Tepe is, of course, former Minister for Finance and Economic Planning. Dr. Champong, your quick take. Let's narrow it down to some 30, 40 seconds on SAIN.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of align with Uncle Seth's points of view on the bigger issue of accountability of the central bank and some of the issues around the deficit financing and inflation targeting, etc. But on this specific issue of the currency, I think that is the right call of action to sort of replace some of the old notes and coins within the system. I think particularly the coins with the new enhanced security features, and that would then add or restore, put more trust in the currency within circulation. So that definitely for me is the right course of action.
Dr. Theo Champong, we're grateful that you took the time to join us this morning. Professor Mensah, you have the final bite, some 30 seconds. All right, so we've lost Professor Lord Mensah. Mr. Owusu, so if you don't have any further thoughts, we'll say goodbye to you, unless you have any parting shots for us as we wrap.
So I want to encourage the public to accept the coins and use them. And then also, I want to also let the public know that the currency, both notes and coins, has a lot to tell about the country. If you look at the US dollar, you think of US. If you look at the pound sterling, you think of the UK. Now, when you look at somebody comes into the country, the first thing that people get in touch with is the currency. So the quality of the currency in circulation tells a lot about the country. So I want to tell the public to try as much as possible to handle the currency with care and also accept their coins. Thank you very much.
Thank you too. And that is Head of Cash Processing at the Bank of Ghana, Mr. Dominic Owusu. Grateful that you could join us this morning. So that's just by way of information for you. If you find anybody, especially for business people, these things are important because if you're not careful, you would falsely accuse somebody of carrying fake currencies when in actual fact you don't know that there is an upgraded version of the 1 cedi. So it's important that we spend a bit more time on that. Well, water is life. It regulates your body temperature and keeps you alive and kicking. Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. We have the perfect sizes for all occasions. 330 ml and 500 ml bottles to fit your pockets and bags, 750 ml for heavy drinkers like Benjamin, and 1.5 liters for those who always want more. We've introduced our special 19-liter jar for offices and homes. Now you just need to stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. Come on, grab a bottle of Awake Water and get quality hydration. Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. Remember, for every bottle you purchase, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. Produced by Casapreco. For bulk purchase, please call 026-235-1251. This advert is FDA approved. So we'll bring you more right here on the AM show. Do stay with us. We get interactive with you shortly. So if you didn't know, now you know. At least when you see green, it doesn't mean you should go. It means you may go if the road is clear. We just hope that you take all these tips and hold them dear to your chest, because we always need you to be alive. It's important that you drive safe. Well, it's time to get interactive with you. The numbers to call 0302-211-691, 0302-211-691. We've been talking about the IMF. We've heard from the experts. We've heard from former finance minister. Also, it's a few days to Christmas. I don't know what your plans are. Do you mind sharing with us if you have any? On Home Affairs on Saturday on Joy FM, I had an interesting discussion with my guests on how to manage the times. And it was interesting, the kind of tips that people had on how to survive, especially bringing the kids on board this season. If you traveled outside the country and you cannot afford it this time, what are the options? You could go hiking. You could go to any local tourist destination here in the country.
And this is where honesty really is crucial, especially when dealing with children. But we can't, fail to rope in the fact that the prices of chicken have also gone up. So I found out today, and the whole bit about, I'm not such a big fan of poultry. I am a fish person, but fish is usually more expensive. So if chicken goes up, then it means, Charlie, we're going to be in trouble. So we have
our first caller is from Mamobi, Divine. Hello, Divine. Good morning to you. Let's hear you.
Good morning. The IMF program, I think they should just take their time, because the way the economy and things are going, in fact, they should relax and see that everything is put in place before they can throw in their shot.
Right.
And also for the Christmas, there's nothing for Christmas, because the way the system is, we are not planning anything for the Christmas.
It's as well, Divine. At least you have life for Christmas, right? We take it one step at a time. We understand the times are hard, but we hope that, you know, some way, somehow, you'll be able to enjoy the season. It's also the season of giving, you know, and those who have more are being encouraged to share, because even though times are hard, it's harder for some.
Yeah, and even as we complain, sometimes it's just about making some tight adjustments. But for others, there's nothing even. It's like for those who say tighten your belt. For some people, they don't even have a belt. Exactly. Do you get it? And just the thought, it brings to mind my parish. They started something last Sunday. It made my heart very warm. The Christmas tree in church, there are people's names hung on it. People who may be less privileged, and we were invited to pick those names and do something for them for Christmas. I picked 2, and many others picked. And I think that is the way to go. We'll do our little for others as well.
While we wait for the bigger miracle, let's just do what we can to help ourselves. Well, Albert is joining us from Dansuman. Hello, Albert. Let's hear you.
Yeah, hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Albert, we can hear you. Please share
Yeah,
your thoughts with us.
My take is, I like the way Setepe came out with that presentation. For me, I think Setepe sitting on the back bench can do better. And if he's able to do all these things, why was he not able to do it when they were on power?
Well, actually, if I am to answer some of that, these are things that they did, some of the things they did. For example, when you talk about Dr. Dufour's proposition about this rescue team, he alluded to the fact that that was what they did at Senchi. So let's not look at it from the standpoint of because they went to the IMF. I get where you're going, but you must have facts to back it. Some of the things they did, some didn't work, some worked. So what is the angling?
But thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, Albert there in Dansuman, sharing his thoughts with us. If you didn't catch what he's talking about, you can visit our Facebook page. It's uploaded there. Mr. Tepe took us through a PowerPoint presentation on the IMF program, the steps in ensuring that you eventually get it and what needs to be done. Benjamin?
Well, so we await your call 0302-211-691. We have a few minutes more, and we have a caller from Botiano.
Yeah, Yusuf. Hello, Yusuf. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, madam?
We're doing well. How's Botiano?
Botiano is as dry as...
Botiano is what?
Very dry, like Sahara Desert.
Very dry.
Oh,
sorry.
The Hamilton came earlier. Oh, have we lost him?
Oh, too bad.
He says Botiano is as dry as what?
The Sahara.
Hey!
That's very dry.
The Hamilton came early for him.
Yeah. Well, while we wait for your calls, let me just inform you that the Ghana Revenue Authority is asking that persons who want to clear yourselves should do so electronically. That's the way to go now. We know that the tax clearance certificates is now done online via the Taxpayers app or on Google Play Store. Applicants who visit the Taxpayer Service Centers will be assisted by officers of the authority to apply. Applicants are also required to indicate the taxpayer identification number TIN of the institution or organization requesting the certificate so that they can receive a copy. Applicants should take note and be guided accordingly. Kindly contact GRA toll free 0800 900 110 or via these WhatsApp numbers 055 299 0000 020 063 1664 or send an email for further enquiries. Nanaya is joining us from Dakuman. Good morning to you. Let's hear you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nanaya.
Okay, so I want to contribute on the road safety, and I think it's a very loud about, and I never knew that when it's green, it doesn't really mean you have to go. It means you may go. So then it means that there's a lot of education for drivers.
Exactly.
For them to know, because people have really done a lot of wrong things on the road.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
It's a very good idea.
Thank you so much, Nanaya. Thank you. Well, Benjamin, Nanaya is our last caller, and that's how we wrap up the show. But
before we go, let's celebrate a few people. Our very own Elton John Brobe is celebrating.
Oh, today is Elton's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Elton produces me for
Let's
the 6
clap at him. Let's clap at him. Let's clap at him.
And I didn't know that.
It's not a clap back. So Elton.
Happy birthday, Elton.
This time we are not sending Elton Momo. Since we are shouting him out, he'll be sending us Momo. Elton John Brobe, one fantastic guy. Happy birthday to you. Also, happy birthday to an amazing and super cool boss, Dr. Fred Safo-Kantanka, MD of Best Point Savings and Loans. It's from all your staff. They say they wish you a long life and a fulfilling one as well. God bless you. So, Dr. Fred Safo-Kantanka, your staff celebrate you.
Wow, that's a nice one. And if you're celebrating your birthday today, we also celebrate you and wish you the very best, especially good health, long life, and more money. More money. It's important.
More money.
Amen to that. Benjamin likes the sound of more money.
I love the sound of that. It's the name of a barbershop I know. It's called More Money.
Oh, wow.
Barbershop.
That's nice. Well, one last message for you. The GRA wishes to inform the general public, especially persons registered for VAT, that the Domestic Tax Revenue Division has commenced the implementation of an electronic invoicing system of VAT that's referred to as the e-VAT. It involves integrating the invoicing systems of VAT registered taxpayers to the Commissioner General's invoicing system. Taxpayers who do not have an invoicing system will be required to issue invoices using GRA's certified invoicing system at no cost. VAT-registered taxpayers are to note that refusal to integrate their invoicing systems with the Commissioner General system attracts sanctions. Kindly contact GRA toll-free on 0800 900 110 or via WhatsApp on 055 299 000 or 020-063-1664 or send an email for further enquiries. And that's how we wrap up this edition of the AM show. Benjamin and I are always glad to do this, and we thank you for doing the washing. We're back tomorrow, God willing, at 6 a.m. for more. Until then, it's goodbye. Up next is News Desk with guess who? Not my Peter. Samuel Kojo Grace. He's back. He'll join you shortly.